Supervisor Howard?
Here.
Supervisor Borges?
Here.
And Chair Wilson?
Here.
I will make note that Supervisor Starkey is absent.
Thank you. Please take a moment of reflection. Thank you very much. And Supervisor Howard, could you lead us in the pledge?
Sure can. Please rise. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is now the time for introduction of any new employees. Are there any new employees to be introduced?
None today, Chair.
Thank you very much. And please report any actions need to be reported out of closed session today.
None.
Thank you. Chair asks for requests, deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must first come to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Any such actions? Seeing none, we shall receive brief announcements and reports from each of the board members as to, if they so choose, out of their projects, progress, and or meetings, 2x2s, etc. Starting down there, Mr. Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last couple of weeks, I met with the Director of Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority in regards to the agenda. Met with Nick Rail, Blake Inscore, Pete Jackson, and Britta Goldstein from Green Diamond Resource Company. Had a discussion about funding for the Performing Arts Center. Had a meeting with Ron Sandler and a consultant of his, Steve Athey, in regard to Delaware Ambulance and the services they provide. Attended a virtual meeting of the Last Chance Grade Working Group. Wanted to congratulate Supervisor Borges on being elected the chair of RCTA last evening. And finally traveled to Sacramento for RCRC board meetings and also the installation of the officers of to the RCRC Executive Board. Wanted to express my appreciation for Supervisor Howard coming for that event as well. It turns out it was relatively fortuitous. The guest speaker there was the Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency, Wade Crowfoot, and there was an opportunity to for Supervisor Howard to speak about our fishery closures to him. Secretary Crowfoot admitted that it wasn't on his radar, but said he was going to seriously look into it. So that was good news because he is the secretary over California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Then traveled to Ukiah and participated in a care court roundtable put on by Senator McGuire. I was lucky enough to be there with Director Renell Brown and Cheyenne Hogan and Esperanza Esparza from the courts. We were able to give some feedback about some concerns we have about implementation of care court and how it's going to be funded and who's doing the work, and you know, especially in regard to behavioral health assessments, you know, our current staffing shortages and who's going to be responsible for that, and also county council responsibilities. There's an onus on county council as part of care court. So we're able to express our concerns in that regard, and had a couple of people come up to me in the room and say, thank you for bringing that up. So we're not the only ones that have concerns about the onus of this legislation and who's going to be carrying the load. So, and that is all for me.
Supervisor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Supervisor Short said, we attended the RCRC meeting. I did want to expand a little bit about our discussion with Wade Crowfoot, specific to the marine protected areas. As Supervisor Short mentioned, it wasn't on his radar, and I think it's a very important issue for the entire state of California, in particular coastal counties, to have this issue on their radar. We've been working a lot behind the scenes as a coalition, driven really out of Del Norte County, to get to the Pacific Marine Fisheries Management Council this coming March in Fresno to drive the reopening of both the sport fishing and commercial fishing industries for groundfish, which were impacted by the closure due to the quillback bioassessments, which in this case, there was no data. And so they just took the conservative approach and closed everything. Right now, we're working with the state to flex a little bit of the state's muscle, which we hope to have the Secretary's help with, to allow for at least some reopening currently. What we're gaining ground on right now, and what I would like to relate to my fellow supervisors today, is we saw some movement within the National Marine Fisheries Service specific to the surveys and biological assessments for the species. And beginning in March 17th, that entire week, National Marine Fisheries Service scientists will be here, and they have contracted with Steve Huber and one other recreational boat to take them out and begin to survey for the quillback off our coast within this 50,000th area to shore. That'll at least allow for a data set to educate the Pacific Marine Fisheries Management Council in better decision making as it relates to reopening for these species and not having a full closure just because we don't know enough about the species. That's a really big deal. Potentially, depending on those results, we could see some action and movement not only in the Pacific Marine Fisheries Council, which is a quasi-governmental body advising National Marine Fisheries Service on a reopener, but in addition, some movement with the California Fish and Game Commission, which sets sports fishing regulations for the state of California. So I've got some hopes that we'll see some movement this year and hopefully an opener on schedule with bag limits for a lot of species, but not the quillback. Supervisor Borges and I attended yesterday a 2x2 with the Tolowadini Nation. A couple items on the agenda. One I will mention is their great concern with homeless issues here. We've encouraged one of their representatives that run point on this issue, Jerry, and I can't remember her last name, to begin to work with our DHSS folks, and instead of just being siloed, really try to reach out and include the tribal governments more in these issues, as they have a lot of funding that's focused at that. I also met with Ron Sandler with Del Norte Ambulance and Steve Athey, his consultant, on issues with their upcoming contract. And in addition, met with Michael Bowen with the California Coastal Conservancy about Camp Park issues and the feasibility study that we've been in for the last 4 years. Attended a local Del Norte Transportation Commission meeting, and then also a meeting of the Del Norte Financial Goals Committee, where we discussed the future of a lot of, let's just say, trying to work on issues that CalPERS has caused us with our retirement benefits package through CalPERS. I'm hoping that the Financial Goals Committee will have a policy that we can move forward to the board at some point soon to at least have an open discussion about how some of the unfunded liability within our retirement system can be worked on long-term, because it does represent a liability on the books for all of us. And that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Borges, please.
Okay, so let's see, I don't usually do this, but we're going to give her a shot. So I also attended the RCTA meeting with Supervisor Short, the 2x2s with Supervisor Howard and the tribe. I do want to point out that the contact was Jerry Robertson, and I have her card, and so I know she wanted to come to the homelessness committee, so I can pass that on to whoever that may be. I have that for you. We also attended a prior week 2x2 with the tribe, discussing potential future plans for Clifford Camp and some possible improvements there. I went on a ride-along with Crescent City Fire Department again. to just monitor and observe the ambulance and the fire department, see how they're doing. I met with the Elnord Ambulance and scheduled a ride along with them as well. Let's see, I attended a Rogue Retreat trip with Supervisor Wilson and a few other local officials to tour their version of the homeless shelter and the camps, and I would highly recommend it. It was an eye-opener. It's a little bit, it's what Mission Possible wants to model here, and so at least I have a better idea of what they're asking. So if somebody wants to get an understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, I would highly recommend that tour. I also fielded multiple flooding concerns after our rains that we had on Saturday, and especially around the Lake Earl and flooding on Long Lower Lake. And I was able to go out with our road department and do the breaching with them. I say that with, I basically stood there and watched, but it was, I was there and I got to be a part of it, and it's extremely anticlimactic. Basically, it's literally a stream, 3 feet wide that goes by, and the water starts eroding and it goes out and everybody leaves, and yay, that was it. But I went back the next day just to check to make sure it stayed open, and just because I was curious, and it was probably 80 feet wide. I mean, just looks like a river blowing out of there. It's quite impressive. So there should be flooding alleviated along those lower lying areas around Lower Lake and Lake Earl. And I think that's all I got.
Thank you.
Don't get used to it.
I, along with Supervisor Borges, I did a tour up in Medford of the homeless programs that they do run up there. It was very interesting. It was also enlightening as to what their issues are, what the problems are, and whether they're, how effective or efficient they have been able to do it. And it definitely opened my eyes as far as what does work and what does not work. And so hopefully we can utilize some of what we learned up there as we bring these meetings together tonight. In fact, 2 o'clock, we have an ad hoc meeting on the homeless ad hoc here. So it is those discussions that are going on. Also, I had an ad hoc meeting with on Sheriff's Department with the sheriff and other agencies within the department, discussing what issues they have, what ongoing solutions there may be, and between administration and the auditor's office and others. We had some very good, frank discussions on trying to find solutions to the problems that are inherent right now at the sheriff's office, and not only in Delaware County, but other counties as well, as we're looking at how to deal with retention and hiring of individuals into that role of law enforcement. Also went to Ukiah and attended the NCRP, which is the North Coast Resources. It was very interesting. It's also nice to get together with our other counties as they're all dealing with the same problems, and discussions with them on resource issues primarily. Also was happy to see that the Resgini Rancheria received another $800,000 on drought reliance solutions for the Resgini Rancheria. So that was allocated to them. It was from a switch in allocation of funds that were unused when the original allocations were made. One of the other tribes got $1.2 million and only spent $200,000. So that million came back to the NCRP and was allocated amongst the other recipients to that same drought grant. And Resgini Rancheria was lucky enough to get the lion's share portion of that, about $820,000. So hopefully that will help them in their process of trying to deal with drought issues on the Resgini. Other than that's my conclusion of reporting out on this last 2 weeks. And we're going to move now to the consent agenda. Any comments or from members of the public may be heard at this time regarding matters on the consent agenda only?
Donna Westfall. Please make my public comment a part of the public record and pull consent agenda item number 10 regarding the legacy off the agenda for future discussion. In light of the recent stabbing involving residents of the legacy, is it really a good idea to continue on this path of turning this fiasco from transitional to permanent housing? And maybe someone can explain to me the gobbledygook labeled Children's Impact Statement. How does this failed attempt at homeless housing meet the criteria? One of the 5 points listed, I can't understand how any make any sense. Maybe someone can explain it to me. Children are ready for and succeeding in school. Really? Children and youth are healthy and preparing for adulthood. With drug activity and stabbing going on, families are economically self-sufficient. What? Families are safe, stable, and nurturing. Who made this stuff up? Communities are safe and provide a high quality of life. I don't think so. If I'm wrong, point out the ways. Isn't it time for the BOS to bite the bullet, so to speak, and realize some grave errors of judgment were made? First, in the location of the legacy, and second, in the program and vetting process. Realize that those with addictions need to deal with them. This la-di-da attitude of give them a home and they'll come around just isn't working. The faster you rectify these mistakes, maybe, the sooner we will have a safer community. I suggest you pull this from the consent calendar and discuss the items separately at another time with real input instead of rubber stamping.
Thank you. My only correction, I assume, would be number 15, as opposed to number 10.
Correct, yeah. It's item 10, or 15, not 10.
Good morning.
I have just one short comment. I read through the appointment list for the committees, and it occurred to me that you might want to consider, I know you don't need more committees, but you have an ad hoc committee on homelessness right now. Ad hoc committees generally are intended for subjects of short term, whereas standing committees are for something that is ongoing. I would suggest that the homelessness issue and housing is a long-term issue, and you might consider forming a standing committee on housing and homelessness, because those are really two big key issues, and they certainly deserve the attention of a standing committee where it's open to the public and people can come and participate. You're the chair. I think you have that option, but let those guys decide too.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Schmidt. I'm the board president for DNACA, Del Norte Association for Cultural Awareness, along with my fellow board member, Kelly Troina, and 3 members of our students at Sunset High School who recently recited poems for the Poetry Out Loud competition. We wanted to take a moment and express our gratitude and appreciation, number 3 on the consent agenda, to approve and adopt proclamation proclaiming the week of January 29th through February 2nd as Poetry Appreciation Week. We just wanted to express our gratitude in this recognition of how much this has helped the literacy, language arts programs within Del Norte County among high school students and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I left my pen.
Hi, Robert Durigo. I was just curious on the committee list, and I'd like to second one of the previous commenters as far as having a standing committee for the homeless issues, because I think it became a problem, with the, it was kind of meant to be like we weren't aware of what was happening. And I think it's really something we have to remain aware, it is something we have to accomplish as a community, and I think with a standing committee, we'd have a public reports coming in on it and, have a more robust, open debate. Also, the committee list, I I noticed looking from the 2023 committee list that there's a regional cannabis committee, and I honestly was unaware of it. I've never heard of anybody report out about it, or I believe Supervisor Starkey and Shorter members of it. Has there ever been a meeting of the regional cannabis committee?
Never had a reason to have a meeting yet.
Okay. There's never been a reason?
Not that we've been made aware of.
Reason, but contacts on the tri-agency agenda. I've reached out to everybody, and nobody, the city, the harbor, or the county has appropriate contacts for the tri-agency. Your clerk of the board was good enough to get back to me for one meeting to tell me it was canceled, but I've been reaching out to everybody. I have an email list since November, and nobody would get back to me. And I think I finally found out that the harbor master is kind of the gatekeeper for the agenda there. But they really need to be posted probably by all three bodies until it's organized where they're supposed to be posted. They need to be posted here, if they're going to happen here especially, because the county needs to take on responsibility for its posting. The city needs to take on, and so I commented last night on the city council meeting that they need to take on responsibility for posting at their posting locations and online. I look at the tri-agency as having a website because the county's taken on the response. When I look at the tri-agency in Del Norte, the first thing that comes up is the county's website. And so we find a place where there is a place for the tri-agency to post their online agendas. The county has taken an obligation to do so, but then paused. And same with the harbor, so we need accurate, I'm not sure if the contact list has been updated, but there should be a person to reach out to that will respond about an agenda for that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Any further comment?
For consent agenda?
For the consent agenda, yes. Seeing no further comment, we'll close and we bring it back to the board.
We did have a request to pull item 10. Is there willingness to pull item 10 for discussion separately?
I don't think item 10 was the one that they wanted to actually pull.
It was actually 15.
Okay,
She mentioned 10, but it was,
okay, so.
I'm pretty sure that's correct. Donna, you want the design, Ms. Westfall, the design for the legacy item is number 15, yes.
I mean, we could pull it for a separate discussion, just to get a breakdown if that's.
I wouldn't mind. It's
Yeah.
been a while since we had a discussion about the legacy, and I think it'd be great if we have time.
Do I have a
Can I
motion?
get a clarification? Yeah, a motion on
So
these.
I'd make a motion to approve items 1 through 22 on the consent agenda and pull item 15 for further discussion.
I will second that with just a small comment of thanks to Tony upstairs for item 22, giving us that red pen version of the revision of that job description was very helpful. And I know we've mentioned that before, but Tony did that for us in this round, and it was very nice. Appreciated it.
Pull the vote. Don't go anywhere.
Well, yeah, hold on, Jennifer.
Yeah, got something for you.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. And we have, after the passing of the consent agenda, a proclamation for the poetry. And this proclamation reads, Del Norte County Board of Supervisors Poetry Appreciation Proclamation. Whereas the residents of Del Norte County have a rich cultural heritage and deep appreciation for the arts. And whereas poetry is a powerful form of expression for people of all ages and descendants boundaries, connecting hearts and enriching the human experience. And whereas the poets of Del Norte County and those who recite poetry publicly in our community have played a vital role in capturing the spirit of our community, conveying our stories, and fostering creativity. And whereas the celebration of poetry encourages unity, understanding, and an appreciation of diverse perspectives. And whereas the literary arts contributed to the intellectual and emotional well-being of individuals, fostering empathy and promoting a sense of community pride. Now, therefore, it be resolved that we, the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim the week of January 29th, 2024 through February 2nd, 2024 as a Poetry Appreciation Week in our county. We all upon the residents, schools, libraries, community organizations to join the celebration of the beauty of poetry. Let us recognize the contribution of poetry and the encouragement of exploitation of poetic expression in all of its forms. Passed and adopted this 23rd day of January 2024. Also, I'd like to remind the public that this Saturday there is a piano recital with poetry being held by Danaka in Del Norte County. So take an opportunity, go and enjoy the arts. We have a 10:25 timed item. Should get back my microphone. Huh? I see the stink eyes. Anyway, we have a 10:25 timed item, so we shall move to that. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of this board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up this matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Should have got back to 15.
Supervisors, I'm concerned about the lack of response to the resolution for Second Amendment rights that I sent to all of you January 2nd. Not a single one of you acknowledged or addressed this important matter. Furthermore, would you be surprised to learn that Shasta County developed and passed this very same resolution on July 25th, 2023, without similar action from our representatives? We have a crisis with lack of deputies in this county. We need to promote self-protection afforded to us by our Second Amendment. Now I'm going to flip the script. Darren Short, you attended 6 RCRC meetings in 2023, during which each county is given the opportunity to voice public concerns. Regrettably, you remained silent at 5 of those meetings. This lack of engagement raises serious questions about our county's representation and effectiveness for our leadership. It is disheartening to see our leaders traveling to Sacramento seemingly at our expense, only to seemingly engage in activities that don't serve the best interest of our community. The lack of representation is particularly troubling, especially considering that you ran unopposed, denying the community a choice in its leadership. I urge you to consider the cost-saving potential of remote attendance at these meetings, which would also increase accessibility and participation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Randall South, and I have a matter I wanted to bring before you. And this is that Delaware County should pass a resolution to become a petitioner before the California State Community College Board for the purpose of removing the Delaware campus from the College of the Redwoods and inserting it in its own community college district. Once the Delaware campus is in its own college district, then the county is free to begin accepting money from corporate donors, foundations, and other sources. Additionally, Delaware County will be its own fiduciary for the first time ever for $933,000 plus annually that the State Community College Board earmarks for the Delaware campus, but gives in trust to Humboldt County's College of the Redwoods. And as we all know, Humboldt County is mainly concerned with what goes on in Humboldt County, not Delaware County. There's no reason that money needs to be paid to Humboldt. It should be paid directly to Delaware. Damage to the community from the poor condition of College of the Redwoods is self-evident, and I'd like to remind you of the comment made by electrician Doug Owens, who stated he was moving from Crescent City to be with his son in Medford following the passage of his sister, and further stated the College of the Redwoods had nothing to offer his son. And I think you're aware of the comment. You previously received a copy of it, and I did email it to everybody this morning for a second time. This comment is one piece of evidence suggesting that something needs to be done with College of the Redwoods. Additionally, the motivation for bringing this petition before the county should not in any way prejudice the petition, since the public interest is varied. Each one of us has our own story, and, you know, my interest in doing it is not necessarily the same as somebody else's. So I think we have to look at the bigger picture of what is this county getting out of Sacramento, rather than merely my own interest in reforming the system. And so the question I have before you is, can we get a motion to put this on the calendar so the public can discuss it? And in support of the documents is the records and correspondence between myself and the State Community College Board demonstrating how much money is earmarked annually, and also the records indicating that the State College Board has never done an audit on Humboldt County's College of the Redwoods. They've actually made a number of comments suggesting that they know that Humboldt County is either not sharing all the money that they give them, and I specifically point to a comment made by Ho Nguyen, who's in the Facilities Planning Department, because at one point we asked him about...
Thank you, Mr. South. I'm sorry. Time's up.
Time's up. Okay. I want to go ahead and turn this in for the record to file it.
Right over here.
I have meetings this afternoon, and I won't be here to address item number 29, so I'd like to do that now if I have your permission.
Sure.
Okay. And please make my comment a part of the public record. Years ago, when I sat on the city council between 2008 and 2012, I was assigned to attend tri-agency meetings. At that time, I realized it was a failure. I couldn't see any business that succeeded, but rather failure after failure, winding up owing a lot of money. So I'm deeply concerned that some of you are trying to resurrect this agency. Just look at recent events and questionable actions that took place during the meeting on January 4th, which was not publicly announced or posted anywhere. It has come to my attention that during this meeting, Chris Howard reportedly instructed Kevin Hendricks to bring supporters for the oceanic wind turbines, seemingly attempting to sway the discussion in favor of this controversial project. Also, it has been brought to my attention that the verbiage in the bylaws was altered from oceanic wind turbines to renewable energy in what appears to be an attempt to mislead the public. It is disheartening to witness such manipulative tactics being used to push through an initiative that lacks public support and has raised significant environmental and community concerns. It is clear that resurrecting the failed tri-agency using fear-mongering and contentious tactics is neither productive nor ethical. It is unacceptable that these actions were taken without the appropriate level of public disclosure and engagement. This lack of transparency not only undermines public trust, but also represents a waste of precious resources and taxpayer dollars. It's no wonder that the public doesn't trust their government. I strongly urge you all to vote against the tri-agency and to reject these underhanded tactics.
Thank you. Any other comments? We're going to close the comment period, but I do need to bring back number 15 off the consent agenda. We were opening that up for discussion. So if we can, oh, we do have a time item? Okay. We do have a time item, community assessment survey, older adults presentation, Aggie Kraft.
She'll be participating via Zoom.
Okay.
Just might take a minute for the transfer to happen.
Just while we're waiting for Maggie to come on, and you could go ahead and put her on. I just want to say, I don't attend the RCRC meetings, and it was good to watch Supervisor Short at those meetings. Yeah, I know you've only been on that committee for a year now, but I talked to your fellow RCRC members from the other counties, and you do quite actively participate. And matter of fact, we're quite persuasive on several of your arguments as it came up with the other 40 counties on specific issues. So even though you don't potentially see that in the notes of RCRC, Supervisor Short does actively participate, at least from my direct observation. So I did want to clarify that.
Oh, yeah. Maggie, are you online? Yes, we are talking. It is time for your presentation.
Great, well, thank you. And I see myself on the screen twice, so I'm going to just ignore that. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. We don't usually come to you twice in 1 year. We certainly can, but we wanted to bring you some results of a recent survey, a statewide survey that was done. And my coworker, Marin Rose, our planner, will go into the details for you, but I wanted to just tell you, give a shout out to the people of Del Norte County, because this was a statewide survey, approximately 14,000 people statewide, or maybe it was 12, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that many people responded. However, for Del Norte and Humboldt County, we got more than our percentage of the older adult population responding. We put an extra effort in and people really delivered. So what we got was some good data from people living in Del Norte and Humboldt County, and we represented our area well to let the state know what the issues are that we are addressing or trying to address and dealing with in our communities. So I want to thank everybody who filled out the forms that were mailed to them or did it online, and really thank everybody in Del Norte County who made this successful. And Marin's going to give you a little bit of information about what was found. So I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
Hi, I'm here and I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm hoping all I got to do is click on it. Can you see it?
You will need to share your screen.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Down here at the bottom. Thank you. Okay, so I start from beginning. So I want to give you a little background on it's called the Community Assessment Survey of Older Adults. It's been around for 20 plus years. The company that sponsors this is called POCO, and their goal primarily is to provide evidence-based feedback to bring the voice of older adults and other stakeholders into the decision-making process. So for those older adults living in Del Norte County. And so we did administer the survey in both counties separately. We had a couple of different methods that we used. The first phase included a randomized statistical sampling method. The respondents were randomly selected and they mailed out 2,800 older adult surveys. Prior to that, they sent out a postcard to let them know the survey was coming. And then the second phase, once we finished the random sampling phase, we opened participation up to everybody 55 and older. And we did a publicity campaign for that. And so you can see here, we got a total of 336 surveys from Del Norte County. Our POCO folks told us that was really great. They thought that was really a good response for our small rural counties. So the way the results are presented, and we did provide you with a full written report with the full results. We won't have time to get into everything today, of course. But there's what's called domains of community livability. And within that, there are topics, subtopics, livability topics. There's 17 livability topics within the domains of community livability. The first one is the overall community quality, and Del Norte County was was actually quite scored, both Humboldt and Del Norte counties scored quite high. They looked at things like, is this a place you plan to live and remain and retire in? Would you recommend your community to older adults? And on the place to live and retire, the rating was 57. And the rating is based on a rating of 0 to 100. And the results are tabulated by combining the good and excellent, the top 2 level ratings. And then for recommending and remaining in the community, the score was 64. So you can see these are the community design includes housing, mobility and land use, feedback, employment and finances, equity and inclusivity. Health and wellness has several livability topics within it. Information and assistance and productive activities. And for Del Norte County, the 3 highest livability topics were civic engagement, which is in the productive activity category domain, mobility, which is back here in the community design domain, and quality of older adult services, which is in information assistance. And the 3 lowest domain livability topics were 2 of them were in the health and wellness. One is independent living, the other one was mental health, and the other 3rd lowest was housing, which is within the community design topic or livability domain. The other thing this survey provided is a benchmark, a national benchmark comparison. And so as you can see, these icons show you the results by comparison to the nation. And POCO has collected, because they've been doing this survey for a long time, has collected information that allows a community that uses this to compare itself with the nation. And so there are 52 items in the survey that give us a comparison to nation benchmarks. There's a couple caveats with this. One is that it's not designed or intended to be presented as either good or bad, but it's basically a way just to show some comparison to how the nation is doing and how the community is doing, how the county is doing. The other thing to be aware of is that they don't break out their national benchmark by area size. So they've combined all urban results and all rural results. And I think, hopefully at some point they talked about it would be more useful for us if we could do a comparison of our rural areas to other areas of comparable size. But at any rate, it does give us just a little bit of input on a comparison for the county. So we don't have time to do all 17 topics today. So I picked a couple, one the highest and one of the lower ones. So we'll start with civic engagement. It's in what's considered the productive activities domain. The rating average of community quality items is 35. It looks at caregiving and social engagement as well as civic engagement. So civic engagement looked at the percent reporting excellent or good within these 3 items. One related to volunteering and participating in community and feeling connected and engaged. And so by comparison, Del Norte County respondents run a bit lower, up to 10 points lower than at the national level. However, 45% said that, there were pretty good opportunities to volunteer. Looking a little more in depth at civic engagement, there's what's called status indicators, and it just asks the respondents more questions about do you volunteer and how much time do you volunteer if you do. So you can see that almost half the respondents said they do volunteer up to 3 hours a week, which is really good. It's an important aspect of our older residents and their contribution to our community. More on status indicators, we're looking at the percent here reporting yes in these items. 80% said that they voted in the most recent election. Interesting, the 33% indicated they have watched an online or television local public meeting, and that actually gives Del Norte County residents a bit higher rating than compared to the nation. And then other aspects of this include attending local public meetings and/or participating in a civic groups. So the next part of the survey looks at, first it gives the respondent the chance to rate the community on items in that topic, but it also asks for them to tell us about personal issues they might be having in that topic area. So here you can see that, 52% said that it was a problem. It was either a minor, moderate, or major problem. Feeling like their voice is heard. Now, in the written report, I've included the raw data because I think it's important for you to also look at, well, how many said it was a minor problem versus a major problem. But for the way the results are presented, they do combine those three areas. However, at any rate, we're not really any different than by comparison to the national benchmark. So the next topic area to look at is one of the lower rated ones, and that was housing. That's in the community design domain. And no surprise here, one of the things I want to point out is your results for Del Norte County residents is comparable in terms to the Humboldt County respondents in terms of the areas that they rated high or low. But Del Norte County tended to run a little bit higher or lower overall. But in terms of which items, there's not significant differences. Housing, we think, is no surprise as an issue for the state. It'll be interesting when the state, hopefully we can have access to all the other area agencies on aging data. And it would be interesting to look at housing and see if there's really much difference in any area of the state with respect to housing. So housing looked at in terms of rating quality of housing, quality of community and housing. There's problems in variety, availability of affordable housing and availability of accessible housing. In particular, variety of housing options was 20 points below for the national benchmark comparison. And then going on to look at personal issues that the respondents might be having with housing. You can see whether it's a minor, moderate, or major problem, maintaining your home, doing heavier, intense housework, maintaining your yard is a bit more problematic by national comparison. But I look at this and I say, wow, 67% are having problems maintaining their home, but that's a problem nationally because, there's nothing high or low about that one. So it's important to, normally we do needs assessment, but one of the things that's nice about this PULCO survey is it gives us some information about what kind of economic contribution older adults are making in the community. And we want to kind of attack the stereotype that older adults are, always are only needing things and never contributing anything. So they looked at things that older adults do make that are significant contributions, whether it's paid or unpaid. They contribute through volunteering, providing help to families and friends, and in particular, providing caregiving, both to friends and families and neighbors and so forth. There's detailed questions in the written report that give you much more detail on the activities and the hours put in by various kinds of activities. So they gave us an estimate of almost $218 billion contributed by our older population in Del Norte County for both paid and unpaid work.
Marion, you said billion. Look at that number again.
217,000. I don't know why I have a problem with 217. Almost 218,000. Is that right?
Million.
Okay.
Million, not billion.
Thank you. I should write it out so I don't forget. Moving forward, we're hoping that we can take these results and there's some suggestions that PULCO provided us of what we could do, besides, of course, we're using the survey results in our area plan process that we're now developing. We're in the process of writing our next 4-year area plan, which is a comprehensive plan of our proposed services for Del Norte County and Humboldt County. And it's a 2024-28 that will be submitted to the Department of Aging. But beyond that, I think there's more that could be done where we, with the different topic areas, you could assemble stakeholders, look at the results. It's good information to let, different entities know about, the impact of the community on older adults, identify some key focus areas and begin to develop a plan, even if it's just a small, limited effort to make improvements. So that pretty much wraps up the presentation. I thank you for your time, and if there's any questions.
Thank you so much. Any comment on this issue from the public? It is a study that was put out in order to help address the issues of critical need to the seniors. Area 1 on Aging is a group that focuses on seniors. And it did a survey and identified critical issues for Delaware County. That's what it's about.
Is something going to happen as a result of this survey?
We have a committee that addresses these issues. This is information that provided to them and to the county.
Hi, I'm Robert. I skimmed the board report last night. I noticed affordable housing and primary care providers, healthcare was a big thing. And so I've been having healthcare issues, since I got back this summer. I had lost my mom. I started having seizures. And so all of a sudden it's a special interest for me, And so I found it was very difficult to line back up with my doctor. And I know it's a national problem, but we do have, the healthcare district, and you read their website about what they're formed for. They're actually to provide some sort of healthcare service, and a lot of time they're declaring it's diabetes month or giving out pool passes, and I think they've got like a $2 or $3 million budget. And I'd like the county to retackle, I think it's an old pledge you made back in 2006 when we built the Open Door Clinic, that we were going to try to attract more primary care providers. And I think it's devolved there quite a bit to where Sutter doesn't. Sutter's now showing up because I practically used a private detective to get Mitch Hanna's phone number. And so Mitch Hanna started sending a Sutter representative back to that meeting for the first time, I think, in a while. And that's your hugest partner in bringing doctors up here. And Open Door's your other one. They've got an $8 million income between Humboldt and Delnor, $80 million in revenue, $8 million in income. We don't get to know where it came from and how they're investing, and I know they're building another clinic in Humboldt. So they're a partner with a budget. And then the healthcare district has a budget. And from what I understand, I think if we want 20 doctors, you might have to come up with 20 million. But that's between Sutter and Open Door, the healthcare district, and maybe one of our measure taxes, because you're going to need marketing. It's 50 times more expensive to market to a doctor. I can sell a hamburger pretty easy to anybody, but doctors are hard to hit with advertising. They don't like put colored advertisements in medical journals, that show our beautiful redwoods and whatnot. They're hard to hit. So we have to be willing to spend 50 times more to reach a doctor with an advertisement, showing why they'd want to practice up here. And we probably have to pay them twice as much as, and give them some sort of bonus. And it's really, we need 20 physicians. And it's not just the county that has to deal with this, but the county has to become a partner in it again with our big nonprofit healthcare providers. Because it's been a pretty empty hall down there at the healthcare district, the meetings I've been going to. And affordable housing. And I know we never want to talk about this, but we should figure out if there's a limit to how many of our existing residential dwellings will give up to vacation rentals. Is it 4%, 10%? And I don't think that when we talk, and I think that the area for aging needs to take this into concept too when we talk about, we're just like the national basis, and we're just not, because of our no now loss policy, because of our national parks, because of our national forests and attractions. Because of that, we're inclined to become like Aspen and Honolulu. And that's not a community where the people, it's got its original inhabitants anymore. You know what I mean? And so the housing element and these guys, I think, need to be brought into the loop about efforts we've been making since 2006, so that we can make a plan to retackle it again.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Bring it back to the board for comment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd actually like to, I think Mr. Drigo did bring up something good as it relates to access to health care. It's a reasonable comment, and his recollection is correct from the 2006-2007 period. and if the board recalls, back in that period of time, there was a physicians recruitment and retention effort that was put on by the Chamber of Commerce, the Healthcare District, and Sutter Coast Hospital, it was well-funded, but it was specifically set out to the task to bring physicians to this community, and then, once they got here, retain them, which was very difficult back then. We were losing physicians at an alarming rate, mostly due to their spouse or significant other not liking our community, not liking the weather, the typical scenario that you mostly hear. But that's kind of fallen off the map, and a lot of that recruitment retention has fallen on the back of Sutter Coast Hospital in recent years, and they've done a lot to really bolster their efforts to be in a pool of doctors that circulate throughout the region, but it doesn't put a body in our community full time. And so I think it's a real need. As many of you might know, recently Sutter flew, and I think they'll be announcing soon their a new CEO replacing Mitch Hanna. I don't know when that will become public, but it is my understanding that position is now, an offer has been tentatively made, and hopefully we'll be hearing about that shortly. I think this is a good opportunity not only for the healthcare district, but also for the Board of Supervisors to rekindle the relationship we used to have with Sutter and begin some really open dialogues on how we can support efforts to address the concerns that are being brought to us by the public, like Mr. Drigo stated, as it relates to healthcare. So that's all I wanted to say. Appreciate the time also from this report, because it is things that I see in our Del Norte Senior Center meetings.
Any other comment from the board? I know this is an ongoing problem. It has been for a long, long time in Del Norte County, trying to get and recruit and have physicians. Right now, so much of what we do is done by video conferencing, and that is insufficient, and it does not really serve, especially when we're dealing with mental health issues. That individual one-to-one, one of the biggest problems in our mental health community, and is that in order to properly serve that community, there has to be this build of trust, and you just don't do that on a video call. It just does not get done. And so, I mean, not only just general practitioners, but specialists. It is very hard to attract specialists, especially when the hospital is designed and set up the way it is, where you cannot have long-term stays, nor do you do a lot of these things that attract those services that are necessary and needed. And I know even obstetrics, we had a problem just for a while there on having an obstetrician in Del Norte County. So it is a problem, and I do think it's something that we should tackle again and focus our efforts on trying to help and recruit, because that is a huge issue for those seniors that live here and oftentimes find themselves having to travel long distances just to have a doctor see them. Is there any action needed to take it? I don't believe. Nope. So at this point in time, we're going to move on. 25, they were unavailable for processing, for giving their presentation today. So we're going to move to number 26, which is the Treasurer's Report.
I wasn't ready. Oh, good morning. Thank you. First of all, thank you for approving my next year's investment delegation. I really appreciate that. And this report, I think, will show some of the good things that might be coming up in 2024. So my name is Barbara Lopez, for those who don't know, and people at home. I'm the Del Norte County Treasurer. This is my quarter 12/31/23's Treasurer's Report. All right, so for the end of that quarter, we closed out the portfolio at $144,115,943. Majority of that portfolio consists of government agency investments. It's about 44% of the portfolio. 12% is CDs. I can keep going. Oh, there we go.
We're back.
CAMP is our local agency investment fund that we're using right now. And there's about 36% of the portfolio in that. LAIF, I'm keeping low, just because the rates on LAIF are low as it has been in the last couple years. Mitigation fund is still with a balance of about $3 million. And we have some CalTrust money that I don't like in there, but I can't get rid of it. So as soon as that is starting to get better, I'll get rid of that as soon as I can. But everything's pretty much stayed the same this last quarter as previous quarters. This was a little slide that I've done in the past, just so everyone can see kind of where the funds lie in the portfolio. It hasn't changed much. School districts, 38% of the portfolio. County funds, which include the road fund, DHHS funds, general fund dollars, any of the grant money that we're getting, Measure Us money, Measure Our money, some of the fairground money's in there too. So that's about 53% of the portfolio. And then 8% of it's special districts and JPAs. Okay, so again, like I've mentioned the last few quarters, camp is still outperforming LAIF, so we'll keep money in there. Soon it won't be. I feel like probably the next 6 months it's going to start going down. So I'll just roll it into LAIF and enjoy the fruits of that, that account. This is something new that I have been pondering for a while. Our portfolio is quite large, and I feel it might be in the best interest of the dollars that we have available to invest to maybe look at a portfolio asset manager. By no means would I give this asset manager the entire portfolio, but it would be something that I could give a portion of the portfolio to them to invest in. They handle millions or billions of dollars of, jurisdictions' money, public funds, and they have a lot of buying power, and they can get better rates than what I can get just because they can buy so much of it. But there is an offset, there's a cost to that. So I'm interviewing asset managers, seeing if I'm, interested in doing it, if it's going to be a benefit. Never entertained this. I don't think the county has ever, but we've never had $145 million in a portfolio. So it's exciting. I think it could be really good for the portfolio. So I just want to, do my due diligence and make sure I pick the right one, or if I decide to. So you might see that on the agenda moving forward. Haven't decided yet. It's new territory for me. And I'm definitely going to reach out to my other treasurers and ask advice and whatnot. And with that, because I have been interviewing them, they like to see the investment policy. And so I've had that sort of reviewed in the last couple months, and our investment policies is pretty standard statewide. There isn't anything out of the norm. They had a couple ideas for me, but if I do want to do any kind of amendments, I'll bring that forward too. But again, nothing out of the norm. Our investment policy is pretty standard statewide. So just a couple new things. Interest earnings, I had to double check my math because I couldn't believe what I had written, excuse me. So we did earn $1.1 million in investment interest this quarter, and I'm shocked, I'm amazed, I'm happy for all the funds, and I'm hoping they're really seeing that. I don't know if they analyze their funds to see that investment apportionment. They'll definitely see that hit. I think the auditor will close out the books here in the next week or so, so they'll see that exciting dollar amount in their funds. And it's just going to get better, I think, in the next year, because a lot of the purchases that I make are 5 years, and I really try to keep them as bullets and the higher rates. So hopefully we'll see this continue for a little bit. With that said, the rates are coming down a little bit. In the past, I was able to pick up a 5-year bullet for well over 5. I picked one up last week, and it was 3.875, but it's still a bullet. I still like them. I want to make sure that we're, getting the rate that we can for the longest period of time. So I'll just keep an eye on the market, and when we have the cash, which we do have cash, but I want to be conservative with it as well, I'll pick up some of those bullets. LAIF is starting to creep up at 3.9%, but camp again, 5.26%, still much better. And then investment activity, just because we did have tax revenue coming in, I was able to pick up some bullets. I bought some in the $2 million range this time around when I saw that they were better rates. And then we had some maturities as well, but typical quarter, nothing too extravagant. And then The cash flow, pretty typical. November's cash flow was the big grant funds that we received for $10 million. And usually December's income was quite a bit bigger, but I think the school district's payroll came out the beginning of the month as well as the end of the month, so that kind of made that not look as healthy, but that happens every now and then. I think that's it for this quarter, if anyone has any questions, or the public for that matter.
Thank you for the presentation.
Sure,
Any
of course.
comments from the public?
All right.
Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
I just want to congratulate you, Barbara. I know we're all elected here. In this case, you are too, but sometimes your position goes overlooked every year. But you've literally crawled to the top of one of the largest associations in the state of California with the County Tax Collectors Association. So you'll be president.
Yes.
This year, and that's a big deal for a county with 28,000 people. I wanted to recognize that because that was a lot of discussion we had at RCRC last week. Was the importance for a rural representative in this position. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Move up
I was shocked that I was even nominated to, go up in the ranks. It's a 5-year commitment. I'm really proud of myself, but I'm also proud of our association. I personally think we have the best association, county treasurer tax collectors. I know that sounds silly, but it's been great. I've been welcomed with open arms, and even though I'm a small county, or we are a small county, I have so many hats in the ring, if you will, that I feel like I have a lot of value. I could talk about pretty much anything in my department, and people really appreciate that. So it's been fun, a learning experience, and I'm super proud to have had this opportunity. So I hope to make everyone proud, and they might be back to recognize me in I think in August here locally, but I'm going to try to talk them out of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
Yeah, those associations are so important for us. When I was sheriff, I chaired the financial managers conference and their board, and it was one of those commitments that I had made that always bore fruit, because I never came away from one of our board meetings that I didn't come back with something that benefited Del Norte County in one way or another, or just opened my eyes to all the money we were being ripped off of. So it was great. All right. That gets us through our timed items. So I am going to bring us back to number 15 and get that off our plate. So number 15 was the legacy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I went ahead and pulled this item because it's been a while since we've had a discussion concerning previous board actions to acquire the legacy and do the updates. We've had quite a bit of expenditures, and I thought it would at least give an opportunity for Renell to address potentially some of the concerns that we heard today, but in addition, some of the successes, if there have been successes with the legacy. So my understanding is that there has been, but I'd like to hear directly from you to address some of the concerns that we've heard, and then potentially some of the successes since the legacy has been opened for permanent housing.
Renelle Brown, Director of Department of Health and Human Services. First of all, since we are talking about this item, I was just going to go over some specific information about this item and a little bit of history, because some of the board members are new and might not be aware of the history, or members of the public might not have an awareness of this. So originally we purchased the legacy at the end of 2020. The plan, the funding that we received from the state was that it would be transitional housing and we would convert it to permanent housing, which would go through a process of needing to do an RFP for a contractor for that process. In order to do that, we needed to prepare some items, so we started developing contracts with we have a property manager who is still in place. RCH, Rural Community Housing, is still the property manager on that site. DHHS handles the case management, so the direct client interaction. And And those property managers handle the logistics that you would expect at any property. They work directly with the tenants. The tenants sign agreements for specific codes of conduct, which includes no unlawful behavior. We have had instances of evicting individuals for that type of behavior and work with the appropriate organizations to do that. So through that process, the RFP was conducted in July of 2022 in order to have a construction on the renovations at the Legacy. No responses were received, so we went forward and worked with a consultant who had helped us develop that RFP to really find contractors out there. So that was quite a process. And then, if you recall, last year about mid-year in July and then again in August, we brought forward the contract with S&B James, who was going to move forward with the construction of the project. And then, well, actually in between the two contracts with S&B James, we did hire that project manager, which is really the key to success, I think. It's definitely a lesson learned from the beginning, that as we go forward on projects, it's important to get that project manager in place. And we've talked about that about other projects coming forward. So we hired the project manager in July of 2023, and he started reviewing all of the plans and everything that had been completed up until that point. Through that process, he identified some missing pieces, some important pieces, to some plumbing in regards to the sprinkler system and the new kitchen units that were being placed in each of the units, and so we had to update the plans, which has delayed starting on the construction since that July date, and will potentially change the costs. So S&B James is re-looking at the costs of what that total project is going to be. So hopefully in the near future, I'll be bringing something back to you in regards to an update on that specific piece, but that gets us to where we are now. So the architect is the one that does the plans. We needed him to update the plans. We need him to be available if there are any other changes to complete the project, and we're really anticipating for it to be done this fiscal year. So that's the need for this amendment. If the board decided not to approve the amendment, then we'd have to get a different architect to do that same work. So that would be the reason for that. So successes. So we've had a lot of different successes at the Legacy. I mean, none of our areas are immune to crime. I had some recent events near my house, and I don't think that's unique to the area where the Legacy is. We work, with law enforcement. We've requested extra drive-bys when there's been an increased crime in that area, not necessarily specifically at the Legacy, but we have a really good communication with law enforcement in regards to incidents that have taken place there. We have a mix of residents. We have single occupants. We have families. We have older individuals that, one individual when they were first placed there had some really serious medical conditions, and this really provided that place for them to get some respite care and then actually have a medical procedure and a place to come back to for recovery. We do still have a couple families residing there. Currently, the motel was a 30-room motel, so we'll convert that to 30 permanent residents, and we have half of them filled because we haven't been filling them in preparation for the phases to do the construction. So we have 15 rooms currently filled and 27 individuals in those rooms. Again, a couple of those are still families, so we're still working with all of those individuals on case management. We provide services. It provided a home for those children in order to have a place to do their homework, be a kid, not have to live in a car. So definitely successes there, and really just continuing to provide a place for those individuals and helping them so that they can be self-sufficient and move to a better place. Any questions?
Yeah, I know none of my fellow board members were sitting here during that decision when the board had a very strong discussion with the community about that location, and it was not dissimilar to what we heard a couple weeks ago with I would say the discomfort potentially with locating a at-risk shelter, a transitional type shelter next to Sally's by the Sea. And it was a hard decision for the board at the time, but in addition, we were promised a lot of success by the previous director, Heather Snow. And for me in particular, in voting for that piece to move forward, it was really about some families that were living in their car out at Pacific Shores. And I don't think with the strong homeless population, and it's over 200, it's my understanding, for homeless youth here in our community, that's unacceptable to have homeless youth in our community. And if there's anything we could do to get them off the streets, there was a program that helped to achieve that to happen. And I'm glad to hear that we still have a couple families in there, but I think we need to go further, especially as it relates to our youth, in transitioning them to some kind of more secure housing. But appreciate that update for now, and thank you for coming up today.
Where are we at with the original grant funding that propagated the purchase of the legacy?
As far as utilization?
Yeah, and duration. Where we?
Yeah, so I don't recall the exact end date, but it was for the capital purchase of the property and then some operating costs for a couple of years. So we've expended that initial state grant. So the funding that we're utilizing for the renovation is other funding that is specific for housing and homelessness or for that eligible population. So one of those funds is set to, we need to expend by June, which it would be a portion of the renovation. The rest of those, I think we're good as far as expending them for the duration of the project.
Now, as far as the programming for operating the legacy and the individuals that are in there, that funding is through what?
Like I said, various housing programs as well as just ongoing costs. We're also starting to implement and looking at the CalAIM reform where we can do some billing. So if we have qualified positions working with these individuals, we can actually bill Medi-Cal for that. We also utilize some Mental Health Service Act funding, which may change with the MHSA reform. So we also use some IGT funding, which we've talked about in various capacities, intergovernmental transfer, and that's an amount that we get back as a pass-through from the managed care plans, from the state to the managed care plans to us in regards to our Medi-Cal population. So it's all focused on that population, and those pots of money are for those eligible individuals. We have utilized some of our HAP, Housing and Homeless Assistance Program funding. I think we're up to around 5 that we're getting ready to apply for. Also some incentive funding through a pass-through through the Managed Care Plan, Partnership Health from Department of Healthcare Services. So it's been a lot of braided funding around housing and homelessness that we always continue to look to utilize the sustainability of those programs.
Yeah. And is there any cost to the individuals for these housing units?
Currently, no, not as a transitional housing. One thing I did leave out is through this whole process, we have acquired 30 project-based vouchers through the Crescent City Housing Authority. So those of you that are familiar with housing vouchers, those are for the project. So they stay with the project. So they'll stay at the legacy as it's converted to permanent housing. And so individuals will have to qualify, which may there may be some income requirement for them, but the voucher covers most of the cost of their rent.
Because I know in our visitation up there to Medford, a lot of their transitional housing, there's a minimum cost, whether it's $250, $350, that basically is being, that they pay into monthly as it's not considered rent because they're basically paying for a program fee. And that's all part of being engaged in that housing, is that while they're in the housing, they have to engage in programming.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that's a great goal to get to have that whole continuum. You know, we are very limited on how much transitional housing we currently have in the community, and so this is where we started. You know, I would totally support further discussions on expanding that and having that as part of the model. And again, that's a community-wide issue to address.
Any further comment? Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve item number 15.
I'll second that. Does the public get to
Got some public.
Public comment?
So originally, this was meant to be temporary housing, and the home key was meant to be temporary housing.
No, it's not.
Transitional.
No.
transitional?
No, it was permanent housing.
So home key was permanent housing.
Correct.
So the county is in effect gone into the, you've become in effect a landlord for the homeless population in Delaware County. Am I correct?
Oh, correct.
Yes. And has any consideration been made to eventually, somehow finding some sort of permanent housing other than what you're currently, and pretty clearly that's a very difficult process in this county as it is statewide.
Agreed.
So a lot of this effort to do something with the homeless in the county, and as for that matter statewide, the end goal is to put these people into some sort of permanent housing where they can actually pay their way. And I mean, in most cases, of course, they don't pay their way because very often HUD steps in and subsidizes their rent. Has anybody considered the possibility that the county, as a landlord, may be subject to a considerable amount of liability if something goes wrong with this process as a landlord? Probably not. I mean, clearly, you had an issue just recently at the Legacy that kind of drove that. Fortunately, the interaction was between the tenants. Should an employee of the county have some sort of an incident that requires hospitalization or, heaven forbid, a trip to the morgue, has the county considered that? Because it, at least from my standpoint, seems to be that the homeless population has a serious problem with crime, and death is a very serious matter. And as a landlord, has the county considered that? Probably not. So I think that perhaps there should be a little bit more discussion about where we're going in the county with regards to becoming landlords of the public, rather than just charging into it without consideration of where these people are going to be permanently housed ultimately, and whether or not the county has a serious risk in front of them with regards to liability going forward. Thank you.
So I'm kind of curious about if regular inspections are conducted on these folks that are living in these places. There are. Good. And who vets these people before they're moved into the places? Would that be HHS? And then I am concerned about children in there because, I mean, I haven't heard nothing good. I'm glad there is some success stories, but the public hears not the success stories. We hear how children are exposed to stabbings, drugs, and whatnot else, and that's concerning. And you guys should be concerned about that. Thank you.
I don't see any perfect solutions, but I'd like to thank the county for doing this. It was, the grant money, and I do see neighbors. I've worked at ShopSmart for years, and I've seen people that I consider just better stock than myself, parents and whatnot. And then you see them a few years later, and you're like, what happened? And I don't know what happened. And it's not a perfect solution. I think if you want a privatized solution, I think we should eliminate short-term rentals on our residential zone properties, because I've had my dad came up here. My parents are like, what'd you do moving up there? I moved up here 20 years ago. And they're like, this place will never get what you guys are looking for. It's miserable. And he came up to see me in the hospital, and he's like, my gosh, I couldn't afford a place up here now. And he's, so there is a difference on what's happening here compared to nationwide on real estate values. And when I came up here, I was poor. I used my tax return, and I tricked the lenders into thinking I had a job up here, and we bought a little house, Yeah, we used the letterhead, and we said they were opening a business, they were opening locations up here for the employers that we, and I got a $105,000 house, and it was tight, sometimes we had to let the water go for a month or whatever, But it's a slippery slope, to like fall on hard times. I was at the shop the other day, and I had another guy come in, the same thing, and I had to light incense when it was over, but he's a neighbor, and so I'm happy that you did something about it, and I just want to, and of course we could always do it more conservative or whatever, but it's going to be an expensive problem with really complicated solutions. And so I have seen people, that were grateful for the chance there, that have always existed in our community, because our neighbors, we all have these family members that sometimes, for whatever reason, won't get up even, or can't get up. And, we can't afford them individually, unfortunately. I've got one in-law in my family, and you always wonder how, well, boy, in the end, we do have to take care of our brothers and sisters, and a lot of us can't afford to, and and I think there's a big argument to say that the government shouldn't be involved with it. But I take pride in seeing when I see the community, want to help itself, because a lot of us don't have a brother, Thank you.
Chair, Supervisors, appreciate you taking some time on this. As a council member and mayor, I was mayor at the time that the decision was made on the legacy. I had some concerns about location, but ultimately the community made a decision, leaders made a decision that we needed to address the need, and we had a one-time opportunity with the home key funding to move the needle. The unfortunate thing is it was not designed as transitional housing, and it's taken too long to get there, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I acknowledge that. However, the point that was made about the housing vouchers is a really important one, because with the housing vouchers that we, the city, the housing authority have attached to this, the value to that is going to bring back in over $500,000 annually to the county to be able to upkeep and take care of that building, and those are guaranteed dollars through the housing authority. As long as you can put a qualified applicant in there, you're going to have a revenue stream to take care of this asset that you now have the responsibility of taking care of. So I think that the sooner that you guys can continue to move forward with this amendment and everything else to get this into permanent housing, the better off. Plus, I think we all understand that many of the challenges that we may face from a law enforcement standpoint, and I know in talking with Chief Griffin, it's directly tied to the fact that it's transitional and people are in and out, and if you look at the same type of call volume in any other apartment complex that's also housing vouchered with low income, you don't see the same volume. And so moving forward with this is to the community's best interests, in tandem with the work that I know that's happening right now for addressing homelessness and transitional housing, which likely would not be the best in a location like this, and you've already addressed some of those things. So I appreciate it. You guys are doing a good job. We just need to keep moving forward, get this into permanent housing, along with the other almost 200 new units that should be built, even within the city limits, by the end of this year, and we can start addressing some of these very important concerns. So thank you so much.
Good morning, Supervisors. Thank you, Chairman Brandon Bieber. General delivery. Just wanted to make a couple comments. One regarding the Zoom presentation earlier. I thought the board had decided not to take Zoom participation anymore. As part of the consent agenda, this number 15 is appreciated to be talked about in the community, and it is a humanitarian crisis. It's sad that we have 200 children registered as homeless. We need to do something, right? You guys come out with your legislative platform today, and it's all support or approve, but there's no actionable items. You guys are a part of what, 44 committees? 200 homeless. You sold 20 properties You're going to sell 20 properties taken off because people can't pay their taxes. How is real estate so inflated? Everything is so inflated. You know, we have to be fiscally responsible. And once we get them housing, where are the jobs? What are they going to do once they have housing? I think there is some liability. You know, what is the grand scheme? You've approved over $10 million, right? Is that just for Mission Impossible? Is it just for Home Key? What is the plan? So these conversations are good. I hope we can do more. You know, property rentals should be addressed. Churches, you know, we need our churches, community partnerships, brotherhood. But we need more than just supporting and writing letters. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on number 15? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board.
Vote.
Okay, poll the vote.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. Thank you all. And now we're going to adjourn the Board of Supervisors to reconvene as the Board of Equalization and approve the asset appeal withdrawal or asset appeal application number 2022-004 for Albertsons LLC, DBA Safeway, appropriation number, area application number 800-000-382.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the withdrawal application.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Poll the vote.
We have public comment.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Seeing no public comment? Poll the vote.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. We shall adjourn as the Board of Equalization, reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Number 28, to approve and adopt a resolution to set tax rates for cannabis retail and manufacturing transaction within the range approved by the voters under Measure B for calendar year 2024. So we move towards public comment. This is on tax.
Anyway, I'm asking you that you please keep the marijuana tax in Delaware County at the current 6%. Marijuana is regulated and taxed similarly to alcoholic beverages and tobacco. In other words, they're harmful substances that people have the freedom to use but are taxed and regulated in an effort to protect the public. It is not appropriate to change the tax in response to the change in one individual's situation or a change in the amount of the revenue collected. Delaware County encompasses a large geographical area. Another marijuana business may want to come in the future, and the present tax structure should still be in place. The tax revenue helps to offset the expense of law enforcement and related expenses. I also feel that encouraging marijuana by lowering the tax is in conflict with the future success of a homeless shelter. Please vote to keep the tax in place and at the current 6%. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robert. I was the only one to pay tax. The previous commenter does exclude that there's a 15% state excise tax, 7-point-something% sales tax, and that the county got the voter to approve an additional 1% tax, and that the drug dealers don't write off their business expenses. Cannabis isn't like alcohol. Like I've never vomited from using cannabis, you know. I've never Ralphed all over myself on the ground and said, "Lord, please, so would somebody hold my hair?" You know, or, you know, I've never did that on pot. I never did my sister-in-law's thing of, and I've never like woken up in the morning and went to get a joint and said, "Can I have I gotta get my $5 out," and embarrassingly pulled out that was all alcohol, you know? And you guys have an alcohol problem, I think. You know, cannabis is in the Bible as cannabism, the ingredient in the anointed ointment. It wasn't always accepted to be cannabis, but now etymologists at colleges accept that cannabism in the Middle East 2,000 years ago is cannabis. It's hash oil. You know, a fifth of the anointed ointment is hash oil. There's churches all over Italy, 600 years old, with Jesus holding bouquets of pot and mushrooms. And I've decided that we're actually above you all. You know, if I was going to sell weed again, I would do it as a church. You know, what I've done is, you know, I quit out of protest. I didn't want to, you know, 3 times I've had guns on me. It's always been, well, one time I had a crazy Dan neighbor have a shotgun on me. I called the cops. They said, that's your neighbor, get along with him. But every other time it's been a cop that's had a gun on me. And I realized, you know, that my 6%, it was my punitive tax for speaking about things like this. And I said, I don't want to buy the bullets, you know, for the gun. And so I said, if you guys would give it to a youth group, I said, I think I could get to 100 grand. And I think eventually I'm really good at business. I used to take over shops for Togos that franchise owners had failed on, where they lost all their sales and then turn them back into operating businesses. So I'm good at stopping and going on things, actually. But I could get you to 200 grand, and that would mean something to a youth group, but it means very little to your general fund. I would do it for 2% or 6% to a youth group. And I don't think any of you should vote about it, because like Chris, I'd written you a letter like when I saw somebody go through for a grow and you guys changed where cannabis pot farms could be. And I had to be on a work group, and I had to like license, relicense. I had to go through a lot, and I just saw it change. And I said, I wrote you a letter. I said, Chris, what does it take? Jars of jam around here? Most places like a bribe, but it's like I just got to like invite you over and give you a jar of my jam or something, right? And so I think like after, and I sent you all emails like this criticizing you and all, and I don't think that you should set my tax rate, because I think all of you have a conflict of interest. I think we're contentious against each other. Dean Wilson's brother-in-law, you know, is Eric Taylor. And he's the one who opened the first 2 shops that don't pay a tax in the community. And a lot of people, like the previous commenter, you know, probably don't care about, you know, ethics and principle. It's just a thing in our community. I would suggest the tax collector suggest a tax rate to you guys, and you accept that. I think Starkey, if she was going to show up, she was going to motion for it to be 6%. Sorry, you guys asked me to bring industry professionals.
Okay, Robert, thank you. Appreciate it.
You guys had me scheduled to bring you industry professionals to tell you what a fair tax rate was. So
thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Do you remember you were at that board meeting and Chris Howard said that I was going to bring industry professionals to tell you what a fair tax rate was? Do you think it was going to be in a 3-minute public comment?
Thank you. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you. You should recuse yourself, though.
Any other?
It is illegal.
Any other comment from the public? No, bring it back to the board, please.
This is an opportune time to have this discussion, and I would love to hear the opinion of our tax collector on this subject if she is so willing. I think it would be helpful for this board to hear that opinion. And then also I want to confirm, since we do have the mayor of the city council here for Crescent City, you know, what was the discussion that took place with the city to set the bar so low, basically at a 0, to encourage those? Was it to encourage those type of businesses to locate here? What was the city's decision process? So I'd love to hear some discussion about this before this board made a decision.
After the
Thank
process,
you, Blake, for,
sorry,
you didn't need to.
That's fine. I'm Blake Kinskor, Mayor of Crescent City. After the very lengthy process that went through with the working group, and obviously the county went first in establishing their ordinance, we had a staffing change, and so we kind of had to take a hiatus before we came back and finished our ordinance. Really at the heart of it was a real question of how much business there was going to be, whether or not it was something that we were going to approach from just dealing with it as a cost recovery basis versus a revenue producer. And the decision of the city council was that we were not interested in looking at this as a revenue producer, but as possibly an economic opportunity, given the recent changes at the state level of providing these opportunities, and with the looking at the amount of tax that was placed on a business owner already, right, but at the state level, that adding to that likely could, in a very small area that we have, right, in the city limits, just simply not allow for anybody to even explore whether or not this is, in fact, a viable business opportunity. We did some research with local people who are involved in cannabis and in doing so, we simply made a decision that we were going to set the bar low and determine what the market said. Now, we have seen dispensaries in the city. We have not had problems with them. We haven't had problems with compliance. We have not had problems from a law enforcement standpoint, though we just had public comment at our last meeting by Eric Gunther, who suggested...
Robert, please.
I'm sorry, but it should come...
It doesn't matter who it is. We had a public comment that suggested that the city should look at its ordinance again and maybe establish a moratorium based on the number of current businesses already in place. In our 1.7, you know what, Robert? I didn't speak when you were speaking. Please be respectful. Thank you. Just as our comment simply is that maybe it's a time for the city to look back at our ordinance. We've seen what the market has done, and then simply try to determine, are we properly positioned with our ordinance? Should we address tax? Can you set a moratorium, or do you put tax and then that creates your moratorium? But we wanted the market to try to figure it out. We wanted to make sure that we were keeping people safe, but also at the same time providing an opportunity, if there was, for economic development.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blake.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I think, you know what I'm going to say, is it's your choice. I'm just the collector of it. The way the ordinance was written, it really puts the power in your hands. The general fund dollar amounts that are lost is, I think, minor in the grand scheme of things. Mr. Drigo paid about $20,000 to $25,000 a quarter. It's a lot, but it's, you know, it's not a ton of money. But I have no intention of weighing in because it would be a personal choice for me, and that's not where I stand as an elected official. So, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board. Any comment?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we leave the tax rates as they are.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion to reduce the tax rate to 2%.
Public comment on that?
It's
complete.
It's completed.
There's two different tax rates, one for manufacturing.
I don't know if that public comment yield thing really worked.
Thank you. Appreciate
But I'd just like to point out that
We're
the public
done, Robert.
commenter was a partner of your brother-in-law
We're done.
the
Thanks.
other day that
Appreciate it.
was
Thank you,
held.
Robert.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just so as it is now, there's two different tax rates we're talking about. Well, one is for
Manufacturing,
sales and one's for manufacturing. As they are now, if I remember correctly, 6% for retail and 3% for manufacturing.
And my motion is to move for 2% across the board.
Is there a second to that motion? Seeing none, we'll go pull the vote for the motion to retain it as the same.
This is hard for me.
So just to clarify, this is for the first motion to keep it as is for the 6%. Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
No.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. Thank you. And we're going to move on to number 29, which is our amendment to the joint powers agreement as previously considered by the Board of Supervisors, authorizing the chair to sign as signatory of Delaware County Board of Supervisors, a member entity to the Tri-Agency Economic Authority, and direct the clerk of the board to transmit and approve the JPA to the Secretary of the Tri-Agency Economic Development Authority for ratification by other members of the Tri-Agency Economic Authority as requested by the chair, Tri-Agency Economic Development Authority. So we'll open this up for public comment.
So January 4th, Tri-Agency held a meeting. It was not posted. They took action. I've sent a cease and desist letter. They have 30 days to respond. And this, I have been afforded a First Amended complaint by the judge. So we'll see what happens. So by not posting that meeting, it's in violation of California Government Code 54954.2, which explicitly states that meetings shall be posted electronically and physically. The lack of transparency and disregard for legal requirements is simply unacceptable. When I brought this matter to Chair White's attention during the meeting, I was dismayed to see he disregarded and continued on with the meeting and took actions on the agenda, despite the fact that a writ of mandate is currently under court review for disregarding the Brown Act. The significance of the meeting not being legally posted cannot be understated. Furthermore, the board members changed the words regarding oceanic wind turbines to renewable energy so that sport and commercial fishermen would not be alarmed that the Tri-Agency supports oceanic wind turbines. That's not excuse me. Let's not forget that the Tri-Agency has taken $400,000 of public money to bail themselves out because of their poor business dealings. And those people were Blake Inscore, Chris Howard, and Wes White that were responsible for those actions. And the Tri-Agency is supposed to be making a plan to repay the government entities when they take money like that. And it goes silent. I urge each of you to vote against resurrecting the Tri-Agency. The complete incompetence displayed by the Tri-Agency is evident, and it is clear that such an entity is not currently equipped to serve the best interest of our community. We must demand accountability, transparency, and competence in our governing bodies, and the resurrection of the Tri-Agency does not align with those principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, please?
I noticed Linda Sutter mentioning this a lot in public, and I've been trying to follow all the meetings, the healthcare district meetings, school board meetings, anything that's governed by the Brown Act, 72 hours in advance, daylight, posted 24 hours accessible. Anything like that I've been following for 3 months straight. And I figured out the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau, they're Brown Act bodies too, since they all have membership from the county, harbor, and city, and funding from the county, city, and harbor. And I've been able to get agendas from the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitor Bureaus for their meetings, and I have not been able to get agendas for the Tri-Agency. And I do regularly post the physical locations that are common for our meetings locally. It's not an unusual problem, like the December Fish and Game Commission meeting went off without being agendized publicly. It's now has a substantial record of incompliance with the Brown Act, I would have liked to have made that January 5th meeting. And so I called the person who wrote in defense of them in the triplicate. And I said, where are you getting these agendas? And he said, well, it's kind of tough. He said, sometimes the clerk of the board's from the city, sometimes it's the county, sometimes it's the harbor. He's like, I got mine emailed from the harbor master. But the harbor master's not listed as a contact for the Tri-Agency. And you have no public posting location for their meetings. And so, you know, the end result is Linda's going to win, you know, the suit. And I don't see why the county doesn't once in a while just say, oops, you know, like a newspaper would do, redact. We made a mistake because we didn't post these meetings. And so we're going to have to do some do-overs. We all do that, make a mistake, and then say, oh, I made a mistake here. That one didn't even get agendized, you know. It'd be easier for, I think, the county, the city, and the harbor to take a step back and say, if we want to reinvigorate this, if we want to get this body going again, we all have to post the meetings until we have an official place where they're posted. That's just the law. And then also recognize that you do have you have the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, and they should serve the purpose. I think they're a nonprofit that is a Brown Act body that involves tri-agency, the harbor, the city, the county. And so it is another body, and you start wondering, can you guys cover another body? Are you guys going to, when are they going to get posted? They have not been posted. And I didn't want to join Linda on this until I really realized, you know, and I can't get to a tri-agency meeting. The last one that anybody wrote me back with was Kylie, that it has been canceled. And nobody in the harbor or city or county, other than that, everybody's been checked with the other guy. It's been like a loop around. And I haven't been able to make one of their meetings. And I think I'm pretty diligent in my efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janelle Kovalt, and I'm a Crescent City resident. And, you know, I mean, I've heard about the tri-agency. I haven't lived here that long, but I've heard about the tri-agency and the problems in the past. But, you know, it seems to me that there is a potential here for good to be done. And the only thing that I'm a little concerned about is the amendment that that does not allow funds to go towards offshore wind. And I think that we all agree that our community needs good-paying jobs. These offshore wind leases are happening. They're happening in Humboldt. They're going to be happening here. We have, I think, the highest average wind velocity off the coast of Del Norte County. And so, you know, they're not going to be visible to us. They're 20 miles out. There's a possibility for much needed, good paying jobs here. I think it's kind of crazy to limit our participation and in this growing industry and the job opportunities. And just for your information, I fished in Bristol Bay with my husband and my son for 20 years, and I do know about fishing, and I moved here because of fishing and because I love fish. But the ocean is warming. There is acidification, which affects the food for our fish. I think we need to embrace green energy and green possibilities. And if we don't, I think we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. Just a side note, there's a group of concerned, or not concerned, but community partners, and we're putting on a offshore wind event on March 2nd at the United Methodist Church, and we have a panel of experts coming, and I think our goal is it's nonpartisan, and our goal is to educate the community on these different types of alternative energies. We have in April, we're going to be having an event on solar and grid resiliency, and I just think that we want our community to be able to participate and be educated in these exciting new industries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobalt, as you walk away, you said that was March 6th for that event at the Methodist Church? March 2nd. Sorry. Thank you.
Good morning. Wes White. I serve on both the boards of the Tri-Agency as well as the Harbor. I come today to Howard as speaking to you as a private citizen. I want to address the section 5.05E, which states, quote unquote, the authority shall not support or pursue activities involving the offshore generation of wind energy. To me, a clause which is a restriction on a particular type of possible economic development does not belong in a set of bylaws. As you know, potential sites here are in federal waters, which are controlled by BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is under the Department of Interior. 5 sites have already been auctioned off in California, sold for an average of $150 million for each site. BOEM has a requirement for all offshore leases that a community benefit agreement be in place, which allows a developer to obtain up to 30% credit of the bid price for such things as funding workforce and/or supply chain development, as well as reimbursement to those parties impacted directly or indirectly by offshore wind development. In other words, a lot of money can come from one of these community development agreements. Offshore wind off Del Norte County is not going to happen today or tomorrow, and it may not be for decades. However, my belief is we need to be prepared. There's a limited number of offshore sites which are suitable for offshore wind development on the West Coast due to natural resources, transportation, military, and environmental, and many other restrictions. Studies clearly show that Del Norte is a premier site for potential offshore wind energy production, if not the best, then one of the best sites in the world for offshore energy production. I would ask this board to keep an open mind about it. I believe we cannot make uninformed decisions and would hope the board agrees. As the bylaws now read, they restrict in all ways any activities involving the generation of energy from offshore wind. While I disagree with the approach of completely restricting tri-agency's activities with respect to offshore wind power, I understand the reality of the situation. Tri-agency needs to be funded, and currently the thinking of some supervisors is to either not fund tri-agency at all or to be willing to fund it with restrictions to wind power. Let's talk about what most likely will happen with respect to offshore wind in Del Norte. It's already been established that offshore wind Del Norte is a premier site. Let's take an analogy to the Permian Basin. Do we really believe that a natural resource that's controlled by the federal government is not going to be developed and we have the power to restrict that development? Do we really believe that we have control over what will happen here? Let's talk about, for instance, what the government did, the federal government did in Oregon.
Mr. Chairman, he is the person that wrote on this subject. We could certainly allow him the time. It actually does matter because he's the one asking for this request from the board. He shouldn't be subject to this as a timed item. Just saying.
Go ahead, Ms. Ware.
Okay, thank you. Just be a couple minutes. Do we really believe we have control over what will happen here? I referenced what happened in the state of Oregon. The governor made a proclamation that they were going too quickly with respect to offshore wind development, site development off the coast of Oregon. The Fed stepped in and overruled them, saying that we have now identified 2 offshore wind sites off the coast of Oregon, specifically off Coos Bay and Brooking, that encompass 200,000 acres. So that's how much power we have when the state can't even be overruled. How are we as a county going to be? I would ask the board to think long-term about our future. Del Norte is an impoverished county, losing youth with no population growth since the prison came here. We need economic development, is my belief. How are we going to prevent the flight of our youth? What possible economic development projects can we undertake that are potential scale of wind power? Billions of dollars are being spent through grants to make wind power happen. Do we want to control our future, or will we, by default, allow some other entity, such as a regional player, come in and determine our future? In effect, I believe we should be more knowledgeable and up to date with respect to what's happening here and be at the table if this happens. I would ask the board to have a discussion that takes these things into account. Some alternatives might be to completely strike the clause, restrict tri-agency from not advocating for it, but instead keeping knowledgeable about it and even presenting an unbiased series of meetings to you and the other member agencies regarding what's going on, both with respect to its positive and negatives, and or restrict tri-agency for a short period of time from pursuing wind power activities, as it now restricts tri-agency from pursuing it into perpetuity. Thank you for your time and consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comment, please?
Good afternoon now, Board of Supervisors. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. White, for expressing that. And my comment would be to maybe he should take care of his own house first, right, before building the new one. Right, they're already being sued because they can't adequately dredge the harbor. Okay, how are we going to promote industry if we can't keep that harbor going? You know, the tri-agency TRY, I like to refer to it as, because it's been a failure for a long time and it's been documented. You know, members don't respond to emails. Mr. Inscore, nice to see you here promoting more government. Government promoting more government. You know, I implore you to find impact, find influence in where you sit. Create some jobs. These wind leases, yeah, more money laundering likely. Where is the money coming from? Where is it going? Is there a working prototype of a floating wind turbine in the depth of ocean that they're proposing? One working prototype? No. Contractors are letting their leases expire and not amending their contracts. They're getting out of wind turbines. This tri-agency is just another example of government creating more government. How much diesel is it going to take to build those out there? Greater than probably the foreseeable supply it's going to give. You know, it makes more sense to put it in a shipping lane, you know, where it's adequately accessible for maintenance. Why pollute our oceans? Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to perhaps point to the fact that there have been 17 leases on the East Coast, millions and millions of acres of water. Currently, of the 17 leases that have been offered, half of them have had their leasees decline to pursue the development of those leases, primarily due to the fact that there's a number of issues regarding offshore wind on the Atlantic coast, which development costs are about half of what they would be on the Pacific coast. So the idea that wind power is a potential economic driver here on the West Coast is probably not very realistic at this time, maybe in the future, but to spend money to develop some sort of a way in the future is probably a little premature, and that the idea that the tri-agency is going to eliminate that possibility is probably a good thing at this point. Thank you.
Chair, I only want to talk about the JPA. I don't want to talk about wind power, though the clause regarding wind power in 5.05 is
Brandon, please.
The JPA is a foundational document. And so if you're going to place restrictions in a foundational document, they need to be of a general nature, like is in there regarding the loan programs, and that specifically is tied to the past failures associated with tri-agency. A specific restriction really doesn't have appropriateness, in my opinion, in a foundational document because you're taking out one piece. With respect to that, we are coming to the conclusion of our SEDS, our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, at the end of 2024, and we're going to have a 5-year plan. At the very beginning of this foundational document, it says that we are going to focus the work of the tri-agency based on the SEDS. If a future component of offshore or any kind of renewable energy ends up in our next 5-year SEDS, then we may find ourselves in a conflict in the very document that we are supposed to operate over. So that's one. The second thing, as a possible solution, is that no action can be made by the tri-agency that doesn't require an action from all 3 member representatives. In other words, you have to have somebody from the city, the county, or the harbor vote yes. I would suggest take the restriction out, and if the county wants to make a decision respectively as the Board of Supervisors to say, we're not going to participate in any offshore wind discussions at the tri-agency, or we're not going to vote for anything, you can instruct your representatives to say we will not vote in favor of offshore wind, and that's something that you can take up as your discussion whenever that time is appropriate. Seems like that would be an appropriate way for you to voice your concerns as opposed to writing it into a foundational document. So, thank you.
What 3.02 is for compensation, and if any compensation is
We'll get to
provided.
that later.
3.02?
Thank you.
Compensation?
Yeah, please.
My name is Helen Duvernay. I'm a resident of Del Norte County, and I'm listening to everybody, and I don't have the expert's perspective, but I'm thinking of this from the standpoint of economic development and information and knowledge. If you have an agency that is designed to pull all the major boards together in one place so that you can have clear communication, and you restrict that agency from talking about a particular topic that is fairly huge, it's kind of like the elephant in the room, but we can't talk about it, and we can't figure out whether there's something we need to know, you've basically said, well, let's have you walk with one leg. And while everybody around you is competing for those dollars, my information from what I've been gathering more informally is there's kind of like a competition between the three counties and three areas, Brookings, Humboldt, and here, for who can move fast enough, efficiently enough, and take advantage of this economically. We had the prison come in, and that was a big boon. The forestry, basically lumber disappeared. There's a problem with our fisheries. There's all these closed seasons. And so the economic driver of the harbor is hamstrung. If there is wind power in development over a decade, say, then the harbor is going to be involved. They will need another dock that's just for the big boats coming in. Maybe something built off of Anchor Way or something like that. And the harbor will become more of a multifunction harbor rather than just fishing. The fishing industry in town is not real crazy about this because they're not sure what's going to happen, and nobody likes being unsure when it's their livelihood involved. But for the city and the county, the possible potential benefit is there for wind power. You're cited for it. It's going to be happening. You can do it the hard way where everybody around you takes advantage of it, or you can make sure that you know exactly what is going on. And you need an agency that will keep track of it. And if you have some other mechanism for doing this as efficiently as the tri-agency, then I could see maybe hamstringing the tri-agency so they can't talk about it. But if you have no point of single information where you can gather and work with it and know about it, you don't have what all the two counties neighboring us have, and you will be at an economic disadvantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, board. My name is Cody Freitas. I'm a member of the operating engineers. So I'm a construction worker. I did construction for the last 11 years. Before that, I was a deckhand on a tuna boat. A lot of great comments have been made today, so it's awesome to see that there's a lot of discussion about this. And I could sit up here and mirror a bunch of the comments we said about removing 505E and adopting it after that amendment. But since so many things have been said that I already want to talk about, I just wanted to say that as somebody in the community down in the Humboldt area, when I go to job markets and I go to job fairs, I'm having students come up to me as somebody trying to get them into labor positions as a tradesman, and their educators are being proponents for getting students into technical skills, not just college or military. And to have students come up and talk about that, that's awesome. To have the Harbor District, where I was a deckhand, when we would have to cut out in the middle of the night and cut the lines because the tide went out quicker than we thought, and the boats are listing because they're mud bottomed, and now the Harbor District is excited that they're having revenues coming in so they can dredge and support their fishing fleet. So there is money coming in right now, and the projects are a ways out. and potentially barring ourselves from having a discussion in the future where a different path forward, not the Humboldt plan, maybe the Del Norte plan, can align better with the SEDS up here, can align better with the community feelings at that time, I think is beneficial to keep that door open. Thank you.
Long time no see. Hi, I'm Dave Fittigan. For 20 years, I was part of the solution, I'd like to think, sitting in those chairs there. Part of that time, I also participated in the Tri-Agency Economic Development, JPA, and that's what it was formed for, was for economic development. Way back when the inner boat basin was done, as a member of the JPA, I was fortunate to be the chair who got to advocate and push for broadband, for the expansion of it, for speed and capacity, in partnership with John Irwin in the state of Oregon and some other partners. That happened. Good things have happened with the Tri-Agency under the guise of economic development. There were some errors, sure. You know, I think you're limiting yourself by taking out the loan programs, which in your SEDS is probably going to pop up again. It is one of the major ways for economic development to help grow new and young local businesses. But now I find myself as a board member and an officer in the Humboldt Area Foundation as well as the Wild Rivers Community Foundation. And one of the associations we have is with the Core Hub. And the Core Hub, while I'm not a member of it in 2020, it included, was formed executives from the Regency's community foundations, the tribal governments, University Energy Laboratories, Climate and Energy JPA, and county government. And then in 2022, it was guided by a coalition of community benefits advisors. You've heard some good input from the harbor and from the city and from other members of the JPA. I'm going to try not to repeat that. Offshore wind has been identified for this area. It is coming. It may not be in my lifetime. It may not be this decade. But by forming a coalition, much like that Core Hub, when we shift to the sustainable and resilient economy, it would allow for communication and partnerships to minimize the harms, to increase the equity, have a coalition of tribal nations, local governments, community environmental organizations, labor unions, higher education institutions, and others that have come together as partnerships to model what this offshore wind development might be and to answer some of the questions and to help mitigate some of the issues. The bottom line is we need a strategy to help leverage the state and federal offshore wind investments. And there is an agency that is in place that can do that. And it is a joint powers authority. It is a local government entity. And do not restrict it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Hello again. My name is Kevin Hendrick, and Joey Borges is my supervisor. Approving the revised joint powers agreement is a condition for the member agencies to continue to participate and contribute funding for the continued operation of Tri-Agency. The new revision requested by the county, section 5.5E, is a restriction which states, the authority shall not support or pursue activities involving onshore generation of wind energy. This policy statement is the political equivalent of hiding your head in the sand. If we don't talk about it, it won't happen. Offshore wind will likely happen off of our coast, and there's very little that local government can do to stop it. Accepting this new amendment may be politically expedient, but it is bad policy. If this policy is embedded in the JPA, it will be very hard to change later. If we have concerns about the possible effects of wind energy, we're better off being at the negotiating table. If we're not involved, our concerns will not be addressed or negative impacts mitigated. Tri-agency is the obvious choice to represent our concerns. Wind development companies often negotiate community benefit agreements with local governments to financially compensate for negative impacts that may result from wind energy, from offshore wind. Tri-agency is well positioned to negotiate a community benefit agreement for our community. If Tri-agency is prohibited from pursuing activities involving offshore wind, they would be prevented from negotiating mitigation and community benefit agreements. If local agencies are not coordinated, wind companies will divide and conquer to negotiate less beneficial agreements. I strongly recommend that the county remove this restriction on involvement with offshore wind. It doesn't make sense to withdraw from consideration of potential new industry. People can be skeptical, but there is no harm in continuing to monitor this process. There might be harm if we disengage. Removing this clause does not give unbridled authority to the Tri-agency. The county has a veto action, and if any action is not in the best interest of the county, the JPA requires that any affirmative vote must have at least one county supervisor to vote for it. If both supervisors vote no, then the action will not be approved. In this way, the county retains control over the extent to which Tri-agency is or is not involved with offshore wind. I hope that the city, county, and harbor will come to agreement on a reformed Tri-agency. I respectfully request that you remove Section 5.5E, approve this JPA today, and forward it to the other members for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello, Whitney Pinkham. Joey Borges is my supervisor. I just wanted to quickly say if we are going to move forward with the tri-agency, which that's what we're doing, right? I like to see the JPA written with the section 5.05E, the authority shall not support or pursue activities involving offshore generation of wind energy. I think that needs to stay. The JPA can always be amended at a later time if need be, but here's the thing. Tri-agency, first of all, the city, the harbor, and the county couldn't even, it took quite a discussion to decide if this agency should even continue to exist, right? Our commercial fishing industry, and even outside of the commercial fishing industry, our harbor supports a lot of other industries, sport fishing and such. They have plenty of regulatory agencies and other government agencies they're already fighting against just to survive. So while I'm here, usually asking for you to support the commercial fishermen, this offshore wind energy issue is actually twofold. It's tourism and it's commercial fishing. And I really just don't feel like this is a matter of whether we're going to be involved in the conversations or not. This is a matter of survival, and these industries are going down, and we don't need one other agency for them to fight against. If the Board of Supervisors, if the city, if the harbor wants to come together at a later time and have discussions about this topic, that you could do that. You could amend this. You could do it outside of the tri-agency if you needed to. But when you talk about community benefits, just take a look at what's happened in Morro Bay with their offshore wind energy farm. There were 43 different companies that tried to lease the land offshore of Morro Bay, and they had all of these different community benefit arrangements and negotiation meetings with fishermen trying to come up with something that would still save the industry or support the industry. There were 3 leases awarded off of the shores of Morro Bay, and none of them involved any sort of mitigating factors with the commercial fishing fleet. None of them had any sort of compensation to the commercial fishing fleet. And I just think that by entering into this agreement and removing that section 5.05E, I feel like you're just another agency that they're going to have to fight against in the long run. And I would hate to see that from our board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Duval. Crescent City resident. I rise to basically state that climate change is real. Climate change is caused by our human efforts to move things around the world, and we need other ways of producing energy despite, so we stop burning things. Stop burning things. And so basically I bring this all the way back to climate change. We need to consider all the alternatives for making energy. And in so doing, this redeveloped agency should have the ability to consider all alternatives, including offshore wind. It doesn't, and as I said, the foundational, as someone else said, the foundational document should not have these policy references in it. It should just be, how the agency is supposed to work. I know on a previous meeting here, Valerie Starkey voted against this because she felt that the controls and the guardrails of how this organization is being set up are inadequate. She wanted more, she wanted more. So if we want this agency to succeed, remove policy, but maybe, put in more guardrails and prevent a collapse as it's happened before. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Well, I guess I'll start it out. So I'll just own up to it. Everyone's side-eyeing me, but nobody's directly looking at me. But I'm the reason that this is on there. I'll take credit for it, 100%. And so I asked for this to be on there because I fully support the fishing industry. I appreciate everybody's opinions and comments that are for it. I mean, I get that that's great. And my personal opinion doesn't really matter up here. I'm here to represent the public. And so, there's currently hundreds of families out on the ocean right now, out there, putting their lives on the line to fish, to bring the people in this room food. And they're not being heard. So that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm digging my feet in the ground on this particular item. And this has been proven time and time again to negatively impact the fishing industry. And so if I can in any way stand up here and protect our local industries and our local fishing industry, then that's what I'm up here to do. We're talking about an economic development. What's the economic impact if our fishing industry dies? Sure, I mean, there's a potential of wind energy, but I mean, what's gonna happen if wind comes in or fishing dies? We're just swapping. And why are we so focused only on the wind? We're supposed to be an economic driver, we're supposed to be an economic development. Come up with something else. Why are we only focusing on wind? From the beginning, have not been a major supporter of the tri-agency, but I believe Supervisor Howard and the others have put in a lot of work to make the right changes, and they're trying. And so I'm willing to take a chance, but I'm not willing to budge on giving up the wind energy. I also asked about the county's contribution, which I do understand we're late in the year, but he's already budgeted. I would like to hear that you're at least having talks moving forward about everybody putting in an equal share, or at least closer to an equal share. I don't like the fact that the county has to put in the bulk of it. If we're all equal, let's be equal. So that's kind of where I stand, and that's where I'm at. And we could sit up here and say, we can't do anything about it. We just have to let it happen. It's coming no matter what. Then what are any of us doing? What's the point of this? I mean, if we're just letting everything happen to us, then why are we even up here? So I don't believe in that. And so as long as I can sit up here, I guess I'll continue to fight. So that's where I stand.
Any other comment?
Yeah, I'd like to just say, I've kind of made comments kind of to align with Supervisor Borges there that the effect on the fishing industry is what my primary concern is with the idea around wind energy. It's not that I'm negating that there's climate change or that we should focus on renewable energy. It has nothing to do with that. But there's studies, I'm looking at one right now that was published 4 days ago, says noise pollution from wind turbines has been linked to abnormal growth and development in lobster and crab larvae, and it shows that it has a reduced larval survival rate and impaired physiological functions in the crab population. And somebody mentioned earlier during public comment that we are an economically depressed area and it's hard to find jobs that pay. Well, that's why all those families are out in the water right now, is because crabbing is a decent fishing industry. And the last thing we need to do is damage that. So I just have a lot of questions that kind of circle around offshore wind. I'm kind of not sure what, I understand sustained winds, I get that, but I don't understand why we're putting big buckets of oil that have thousands of gallons in them out in the water when we could put them on land. I'm still questioning these kind of focuses. The last thing I want to do is harm our fishing industry. That's where I am at with this kind of going after the offshore wind idea. So that's where I'm standing with it as well. Not that I don't want renewable energy, that's not the deal. But I don't think we can afford to damage our fishing families. Thank you.
How about Pacific Shores? We just put it out there. Yeah. But the wind farm down.
So, Mr. Chairman, you know, part of the reason that 5.05E is in there because of the discussions that we've had up here specific to tri-agency. The discussions that we've heard today from the public in essence as it relates to the foundational document that we're all considering here today, and then driving down to 5.05E, which is very specific, it does potentially curtail this agency from dealing with any of the offshore wind type items in the future. Whether it relates to onshore specifically, when it does hit our county land, if this agency apparently does not have the authority then to have discussions representing the harbor, the city, and the county as the economic development driver here, then that could potentially be problematic. I don't know how to change that piece other than to say that there was a good option suggested out there, is that this board does take up that subject, whether it's in a year, 5 years, or 10 years down the road of offshore wind. We do have the ability to send that message back to the tri-agency through our 2 voting members and essentially kill any action associated with offshore wind. That is, that would be the ultimate game changer as it relates to this bylaw and addressing some of the concerns that we've heard here today. In addition, I think looking at those concerns absolutely into the future. I'm having a hard time with this because I see what's happening up and down our coast, not only in California, Oregon, and Washington, but these conversations are taking place. And I see the Yurok tribe in particular right now moving into position here to take ownership of this issue with the rest of the tribal governments. They're going to have the discussion. If the county wants to preclude itself potentially from that discussion, we can, but I think there's several people that had that voice here at the podium today. We can't stick our head in the sand. We've got to be part of the discussion to have at least us as elected representatives of people, those voices heard, whether it's negative towards potential impacts on our fishing industry or not, but not being at the table is not acceptable. The question then becomes, do we do it as the county government? Do we do it as the city government, or do we do it as a harbor? And obviously, in the past, I've advocated, at least for the last 8 years, once we got the debt issues cleaned up and allowed a free-flowing ability to concentrate on economic development again, that we move forward collectively because we operate better in a community of like-minded agencies to drive certain issues. So I think we work better together as a harbor, a city, and a county, and addressing this on point. Neither of our agencies has the ability to tackle some of these larger issues solely, and we currently don't have staff to do so. So having that directed funding, I think, is extremely important. I guess what I'd like to do, and I obviously, as chairman, I would still like to hear from you today, but was there anything, Supervisor Borges, that you heard today from public comment that would allow you essentially the ability to allow some portion of the wind energy conversation at least take place with caveats down the road?
So I would, I guess, maybe entertain the idea if you wanted to put an amendment in there stating that we'll discuss it only in the fact if we're defending our locals and defending our fishing industry and preventing this from happening. I mean, to say we're not talking about it at all and we're going to put our heads in the sand, okay. But if you want to go out and actively fight for our locals and actively fight for our industry to protect what we have here, then that would be something more along the lines I would consider. But as far as making it less restrictive and saying, well, we can, maybe bring it back to the board if I happen to be absent that day and then it gets passed, I'm not okay giving up on that. If you want to make it more restrictive and put in the wording of we will defend our, so we're not being taken advantage of, I would go along the lines of something like that, which I know is probably exactly the opposite of what you wanted, but I have to say I'm pretty firm on that.
And for me, I am not a fan of the wind considerations. However, I do know that the discussions are going to be engaged in, and whether as a JPA or whether as a county, we have to engage to determine what is coming and whether we need to be a part of it or at least have our voice heard in objections to, impacts to the fishing. I know we just received not too long ago that the Yurok tribe is hosting on January 31st in Eureka. Congressman Huffman and several other dignitaries will be there on this very issue of these wind developments offshore. So whether we engage or whether we just allow whatever's coming to come over us, these discussions are occurring, and we need to be engaged at least to understand what exactly is happening. The reason why we had this section added to the JPA was because we could not and will not be able to, I believe, get this through the county approval without that in there. My position on the JPA and the tri-agency is if our county is going to thrive, we need to have a vehicle that allows economic development to go forward. And the JPA is a perfect vehicle for that because it allows us to achieve and get those grant dollars in, get those program dollars in, and deliver on these types of economic development. If the only way that the county is going to move forward is with this segment added to it, then that's what I believe we should be doing, because otherwise we're going to have a well-intended and mechanism for economic development, and it'll go and dissolve, and that is not going to be in the better interest of our community or county as a whole, because economic development is our only way forward in Del Norte County and we have as a county to propose and to adopt those measures that are going to bring and cause economic development to flourish. And, you know, it's not the perfect answer, I don't believe, but it is the way that this tri-agency can go forward. Thank you.
Yeah. And
do we have a motion?
Well, I need to clarify something before a motion's made, because I think I heard a potential change with Supervisor Short. If that language were to be removed today, that he would not be in agreement with the bylaws. And that's what I thought I heard clearly, but I want to ensure that I heard that clearly before proposing a motion.
That is correct. Trying to think about a way that would accomplish both purposes, you know, stay away from supporting something that would be harmful to another industry, but at the same time give the latitude for the organization to engage. I was just thinking about alternate language to E. I haven't really got it all worked out in my head yet, but I was thinking about some sort of language that said the authority shall not support or pursue activities that would harm another industry in the county or have a detrimental effect to another industry. Or and I invite you guys to jump in as you see fit. I don't know, Supervisor Borges, if that would cover. I think we might be coming close to something that would cover what you and I want, and that's the protection of our fishing industry. But I don't know how.
And I guess that
what
would
the
be,
best way to word that would be.
That would be a little too vague. I mean, I guess you'd have to determine, you know, who's going to decide that factor of if it affects it or not. Who's giving you that determination? Again, I still kind of stand behind the open up conversation of defending probably one of our number one economic drivers here in this county is the fishing industry. So if you want to have the talks to protect the fishing industry about wind energy and protect them in there, something along those lines. But as far as moving forward to implement and go after wind energy, I just can't do it. Don't know if that helps.
Not really.
That's what I figured.
And I appreciate at least Supervisor Short considering how we could make at least this place or this piece be recognized. Because bottom line, we need 3 votes here today, and just to approve the bylaws. And that's why I'm circling back to Supervisor Short, because we have public opinion on both sides of this issue, and essentially, for a large part, the jury is out because the science potentially isn't where it needs to be yet. Just like with what we talked about earlier with the quillback off the coast. Science, because the money's not there, the science hasn't been collected on the impacts to the species from commercial fishing or recreational fishing. And so yet we're making essentially some judgments to protect a species that we have no knowledge about. And so that's like, these studies are going to happen. I think, Darren, rightly so, you cited one, potentially the effects within what footprint is that noise generated from those propellers spinning around impacting larval cycles of Dungeness crab. That study probably references that, and outside a certain distance, it doesn't impact them. But there's going to be studies, as we're aware, that are going to be conducted because we have NEPA and CEQA to comply with. But there will be studies that show impact of probably placing the electrical line that's going to take that wind-generated power to the coast and land it here. There's going to be studies, once it lands here, the impact on onshore resources, and then there's going to be studies like you're hearing today on impacts to potentially birds flying through these 1/4 mile turbines. But we still don't know the results of this science yet. And like I said, the jury's out to a great extent. So how do we now have this conversation and at least participate in it as an economic development body? Me personally, I think you were going down the right path. I don't want to see this agency put its head in the sand as it relates to that specific restriction. I think the points made by a lot of folks in this room today called that out. So if you do have some language that would allow you to move forward with it, that doesn't keep that off the table for tri-agency, I'd be really encouraged to hear what that might be, so I could support that and move forward with the bylaws.
Yeah, I mean, taking into account Supervisor Borges' assertion there that, you know, the language being too vague, I can't help but agree with him. And I was trying to say when there is, you know, put some wording in there, like when there is scientific evidence that there would be harmful effects for a fishing fleet, but that would be subjective as well. I don't know how to get around this piece of it without very strongly saying I want to protect our fishing fleet. I didn't bring up another study that I read last year about a wind farm that was off the west coast of Europe, Norway, I think. I couldn't pull it up, so I didn't want to reference it today, but it had a different concern in that their wind farm attracted crab, and they believed that it was the electrical field pulled, and the crab were attracted to that, and they came to the line that was heading to shore and then quit moving. So it basically destroyed their entire crabbing fleet. Do we have any science that backs up that Dungeness will do the same thing? I have none, zero. But right now, I don't want to take that chance without some really, really hard evidence that says our fishing fleet will be protected. I get that we can't put our head in the sand, so I'm conflicted here. So I'm you know, as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of wording in my head, and it's pretty difficult. You can probably imagine. So that's what my focus is here, is protecting that fleet, how we can do that, and at the same time have a seat at the table, so to say. I haven't figured that out yet.
Sorry.
And maybe if you want to touch on that first, that's fine. It's kind of separately related. Okay. So my question is, what else does the tri-agency have going? Like, I mean, this was, so initially when this was brought forward, that was the number 1 or number 2 goal item. That was all that was on there. So I immediately was turned off. And I wanted nothing to do with it. But do I believe we need an economic driver? Absolutely. We need something that pushes forward. I've got a lot of faith in you as far as moving this forward. But where else are we looking? I mean, this is the only conversation we're having. This is, I mean, we're going to live and die on this sword, and we're going to, you know, this is it. I mean, so this is all we're talking about. So that makes me believe a support for the tri-agency is a support for wind, even though that's what started this entire thing. And so all I'm trying to get at is, does the tri-agency need to, is this the correct place? I don't know. Am I willing to put some faith in my fellow people to make that happen? Sure. Let's do it. But there's nothing being presented. We're just still talking about the wind. And yeah, and I guess I'm still talking about no wind, but I get that.
Yeah.
But what else is there?
Yeah, and to circle back, we're talking about the wind is because one board member in this matter has basically expressed his opinion, which doesn't allow for the agency to move forward after essentially 9 years of being in a hiatus to try to solve a debt issue. And personally, when Chair Finnegan at the time appointed me to the tri-agency, I came into a mess and then spent my last 8 years as a member appointed to the tri-agency trying to take care of the debt issues so we could function as an economic development committee again, which there's no one agency doing that well in the county. Prior to 2012, yeah, we had a loan program that was administered by the place across the street that got us in trouble. But there's, as As David Finnegan pointed out today, there was a lot that was very successful, and we talked about that. Mayor Enscore brought up today the SEDS. The SEDS is the primary driver for the work plan for tri-agency. That is the number one thing. He also presented the fact that within the SEDS, which is the community's document for economic development, that wind power is mentioned in the current SEDS. And if we adopt that, potentially, are we in conflict? Conceivably so, if the tri-agency says we're going to now support that as the work plan. So I don't know how to get by that, but I know for me as an economic development person who wants to see some success here, I'd like us collectively to discuss it, and not just as the county, not just as a city, and not just as a harbor.
And I'll just throw out my one last little spiel here. So I guess I'm willing to take a chance on you guys as making this successful. I'm just not willing to do it on the backs of the fishing fleet. So that's my final little throw at it. So hopefully we can come to an understanding.
Yeah, and Supervisor Borges, I do appreciate that. We've obviously discussed that a lot in getting here.
And for me, it's, again, it comes back to, when I first got onto tri-agency, it was a, we just paid off the debt. My interest in being on the tri-agency was paramount. I wanted to be on the tri-agency because if there's one thing I do know about Delaware County is we have so much abundance and so much out there that is an economic driver, but it is undeveloped. It is undeveloped in our community. And in order for us to be successful and to grow as a county and as a community, we have to promote economic development. And wind power is not one of those things. I'm looking at it as economic development for us. That is not on my plate. But the tri-counties is something that we can utilize to move our county and our community together in a way that's going to be in line with our SEDS, so that we can hopefully have a plan and work together and go out and grab those dollars that are out there that will help our community grow and help our economic drivers get developed, produced, and move forward. But we cannot do so together as long as this language is not adopted. And I have my druthers on how I think it would be best done, but I don't want to sacrifice or harm our fishing industry. That's paramount for our one of our economic drivers, even though they are under tremendous pressure from regulation and closures. But they're still, one of our things that we need to protect, and as a board fight, as we are right now, to try to push back on regulation that is constantly trying to overburden both our fishing industry as well as agriculture. But to that end, the tri-agency, I think, whether we talk about broadband, whether we talk about the 199, whether we talk about business development and pushing forward on things that will hopefully increase tourism to our community, it is one of those things that will help tremendously. Go ahead. Any other comments from the board?
I don't think this board's been left with a choice at this time. We're split 2-2 right now, based on what I'm hearing. Is that correct, Supervisor Short?
It appears. I was going to throw out another thought about language, and that's specific to 505E. What would you think about it saying, Supervisor Borges, the authority shall support our fishing industry and shall not support any activity that would negatively affect it?
I mean, it sounds good on the surface. I mean, yeah, that sounds fine, but as far as trying to approve that through right now without, giving it more thought, I don't think I'm ready to do that. I think it's on the right path.
Yeah, we're not going to get anywhere today currently with this. I think obviously at a later date, at the direction of the tri-agency chair, whoever that might be in the future, we could amend the language to remove 5.05 if there's something that came up. But right now, I don't think there's any path for us forward with approval of the bylaws without 5.05E in the bylaws, even though it's specific. I just don't think there's any path forward here. So I'm, after, like I said, 9 years of work getting us back to this point, I'm not willing to not push forward with the tri-agency implementing our work plan, which is essentially the SEDS document, as Supervisor Wilson also stated. So I would move to approve as written, item 29 as read into the record by Chair Wilson.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Poll the vote.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. So we move on to item number 30, to introduce an ordinance establishing a new speed limit on Boulder Avenue 2 as directed by staff to bring back an ordinance for approval and adoption on February 13, 2024, meeting as requested of the Board of Supervisors, carried out by County Engineer.
Mr. Chairman, I would move we approve this ordinance.
I'll second it. Is that what you did?
Got John out of some work, I hope.
Hold the vote.
No.
One moment, can I get a
Sorry.
clarification? So Supervisor Short, motion, can I get a clarification on the second? That went really fast.
That was ordinance.
Okay, sorry, I was taking notes and that came out of nowhere for me, so I apologize.
Do we have any public comment on this Boulder Avenue speed limit change? See no comment from the public?
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. Item 31, approve resolution establishing a policy for selecting and repairing public roads that are not part of the county-maintained road system, and authorize the chairperson to sign a resolution as requested by the county engineer. Do you have a county engineer?
Does he get to talk this time?
Yeah. You want to speak to this, please?
Sure, and in honor of Poetry Appreciation Week, I've renamed this to Public Roads That We Knows, Needs Repairs, but Coffers Are Bare. So the subject is really about public roads that are not, thank you, I appreciate it, not a poet. The subject's really about making repairs to public roads that don't fall under the county road maintenance. They're not funded, they cannot be repaired. So we were asked to put together a policy that basically says, hey, we know we have 300 miles of public roads that are maintained. There's a bunch of other public roads that are not, and what's the best way to go about making that selection? So I worked with both Supervisor Wilson and Supervisor Borges, and came up with a recommendation or a way of possibly moving forward. And to briefly outline it, it basically says, supervisors, why don't we talk with emergency services, allow them to provide feedback to you that says, hey, what are the areas, what are the sore points? Where are areas that are hard to get to? I mean, I got one call that, hey, the ambulance company called us and said, hey, we lost our ambulance in Darby, had to have it towed out. So, I mean, you know, so there are some needs out there, but, so give the supervisors an opportunity to meet and talk with first responders. What are those sore points? Where can we help? The next step would be, hey, are these streets that the first responders are recommending as needing repaired, are they actually covered by our roads? Are they part of our roads or not? Are they public? Because that's going to be key. Because if it's public area, that's different than private. I don't know that we're going to be making improvements to private roads. So that would be on the engineering and surveying division to look at that, make sure that it is indeed public. And then also coming back with budget in mind. So I would go out with the road superintendent. We can look at potential repairs, like what would it take to make a temporary repair? We can report on how long we think that repair will last. And then how much is that going to cost? In the past, you've budgeted $50,000 for a year to make these types of improvements, but we haven't followed through with anything because we didn't really have a policy. So the end goal is to really get to where we can make some meaningful improvements to some public roads. And yeah.
Any questions?
Do you want to do public comment first?
No, go ahead with questions if you have.
Just to make sure, and I already know the answer, but I want to make sure it's public. We are not going to be making these up to the county standard, and we're not going to be doing continual maintenance on these. This is just a bad situation such as Darby to prevent, emergency facilities from accessing people. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I have a list of exclusions. So, and you've touched on some of those. It's not about bringing this up to road standard. It's just about making them accessible. We're also, if it's a city road or it's covered by some other jurisdiction, we're not talking about spending county dollars on those either. So.
And I'll just make this clear. This is something that I've been working on. This was an issue that came up to me because we had a request by the sheriff's office because he could not get his vehicles into and around some of our roads because they were in disrepair, even though they were non-county maintained roads, but they were accessed and needed access by our emergency services. We had set aside $50,000 every year for several years, but because there was never a policy put together by the board directing staff on how these dollars were to be sent, it was never spent. In my district, in District 5, there are a lot of roads like this, which are in dire need of repair, just to the point that emergency vehicles can have access to and from residences and houses on those roads. And this is not for an individual building. We have written into this policy that it has to service multiple dwellings. It cannot be a single house. You're not going to get someone to go repair someone's driveway. But and it has to be something that connects and is a connection to one of our other county maintained roads. So any of these roads that are off here, especially one of our my big areas is Darby. It's got some enormous potholes in there.
Is that what you call them? You call them potholes?
Well,
you can go fishing in those.
Yeah, I know, you can. And this basically gives staff a way to address, and we purposely set it up to where this information is going to be sought ahead of budget, so that this information comes to the board, recommendations come to the board ahead of the budget, so that it's done in a timely manner, so it's something that just doesn't spur of the moment come up. And that whatever we do, there'll be a report back to the recommendation from planning back to staff, to the board on direction that every year on this process. But it at least will give them an avenue and a means to address some of the issues that our fire departments, ambulance, and law enforcement are experiencing out there, where they cannot service certain areas because they can't have access.
And then the only other thing that I would add is, I know Chair Wilson had previously followed a procedure that was similar to this before the policy was actually adopted, and collected information about a road list. So I have that road list included also in this report. So,
thank you.
Public comment on this?
Well, thank you, because I'm telling you what, I've been out there, and I won't drive on Darby because it's a lake, and I don't understand why it's been just left like that for years.
Unfortunately, it's not a county maintained road, so it's up to the individuals to do it, but this will allow us to take care of some of that problem.
Yeah, well, it doesn't hurt to throw some gravel down and grade those damn roads back there. They pay taxes, don't they? And where does that tax money go to? Part of the tax money goes to roads, I would assume. Measure R has supposed to be used for roads. You guys wonder why We can't get doctors and people to come up here and want to stay. When you start walking that streets in the 5th District, it makes me sick to my stomach. It's filthy with potholes and man-made landfills spewing out of people's yards. Burned up houses, nobody must have had insurance because they're still there. No clearing, no cleaning up. Rats probably love it. I'm just, ew. Come on now. How are we supposed to attract people up here whenever we got a county looking like this? There's no sense of pride anywhere. You have to do it. You have to do it. Thank you for putting it on the agenda.
Any other public comment?
Move to
Chair?
approve. Oh,
Just one moment. I'm recording it, and I'm at my 3-hour limit, so I have to start a new recording. So give me just one moment before we proceed with the votes. Sorry
I've just
about
got
that.
one more comment when she gets.
She's got to fix the recording.
Once she gets it going.
Oh, you need a break. Yeah, we'll take a 10-minute break?
No, 3 minutes.
3-minute break. A 3-minute break.
3 minutes, easy.
Well, hopefully you can get done whatever you got to done in 3 minutes. Kylie wants out of here. Oh my God. This is gone. No, I don't think we made a lot of it.
I think a robust discussion needed now. Someday we can bring it back, shut it up.
Well, I think.
Right now, I'm more concerned, as you stated, getting drains back on the ground. Huh?
Because you guys made it.
Sam?
Where'd you go, Pennsylvania or something?
I'm hangry.
We are back in session. Did I hear a motion?
I had made a motion to approve item 31.
And just to possibly modify that a little bit.
Can I, oh, sorry.
I personally didn't know that this was coming ahead of time. Would have liked to have been able to weigh in about roads in my district, or some that I've witnessed as being part of the response. So I was wondering if we could modify it to maybe have staff give us some time to get some board input as well, so we could speak for constituents.
We went out to every fire chief, the ambulance and the sheriff's office, and got input on every district from them. And you know, one of the problems that came up in trying to establish a policy was the concern from planning that, you know, it was going to be this process of people trying to get their district representative. And so I tried to take it out of our hands and put it directly into the hands of the emergency personnel to make the recommendations as to what roads they need improved, so that we have and can address those issues that will eventually be recommended back to the board for approval. But that the initial identification of these roads and the initial recommendations from planning would come out in that manner. If you want to change that, we can definitely look at what changes you want to put in.
So there is another piece coming to us for a list of roads. Did I hear that correctly? That
I'd like to second the motion so we could actually have this discussion.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So what I proposed, or what I put in here, was just the recommended roads that Dean had collected from the first responders. This would be something that we would handle annually, and I was suggesting that we do it like in October. We start collecting that data each year from your first responders, so that by budget time, you know, February, March, I'm knowing, hey, these are the numbers, and I can come back to you and we can start talking about it before we adopt the next year's fiscal budget. If this list was adopted, or if you added roads to this list today, I would actively start working on putting together some budgets, or going out and looking at these roads and saying, okay, how much do we have to spend, and then come back to the board before the end of this fiscal year and say, this is what I think we can do with the funds that have been set aside so far. So.
there's just one street on there, Union Street west of Michigan. There's not much of Union Street west of Michigan. That's a little short piece that is behind the nursery there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can ignore that, because I can tell you right now that it's smooth. So I'm not sure what that was about, or maybe there's a mistake there or something. So I just was wanting.
That was just a recommendation.
Time to weigh in.
Yeah, that was just what came to us from the fire chiefs and the ambulance and sheriff's office.
Yeah, and I haven't spent any significant time reviewing any of this, because we didn't have a policy, and like, I'm not going to spend time until we have a policy and we're ready to take action. So.
Okay, so once we adopt this policy, then we're going to get rolling on maybe being able to weigh in here and there, starting with this list, but then.
Yeah, if you want to start with this list, great. If you want to add any names to the list right now, I don't see that there would be any reason not to, but $50,000 will take us.
It's gonna go fast.
A little ways.
It's going to go, yeah, it's going to go really fast, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And when you're looking at this particular list, I mean, you're going to physically go by and if you determine that Union West of Michigan, or whatever it is,
yeah,
doesn't need anything, you'll just report back.
Yep.
That's a non-issue, right?
Yeah, whatever the list is, we'll engage at different levels. You know, there's primary screening. Is it public? Right? Is it covered by the county road fees? So yeah, we'll be going through those screening processes, and I imagine that with each of these, I'll come back with an item for or my recommendation for each topic, so, for each road.
We have
Yeah.
a motion, a second on the table.
We have a first and a second. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. That brings us to item number 32, direct the Community Development Department and County Council to develop an ordinance to amend county code to allow for the exemption of certain grading or vegetation removal activities from the requirement and to obtain a county grading permit where such activities are regulated and exempted from permitting by other non-county agencies and requested by Supervisor Howard.
Removing a regulatory process, I will make a motion that we approve this.
Thank you. And I'd second that motion.
Public comment? Any public comment on this?
Well, where are you talking about here?
34.
32,
Sorry.
Third district or the whole county?
whole county.
Okay.
Bring it back to the, oh, there we go.
The road is just as Short's comment, remove the regulatory process, and I've been asking to remove the annual hearings at the cannabis thing. Sometimes point out the hypocrisy of you guys.
The one clarifying point would just be that we're not talking about anything that's within the coastal zone. That's the only clarifying point that I would make right now.
So is this to, sorry, Dave Powell, is this to remove grading permits for everybody or just certain things that the county needs to do?
Well, is there any other questions, Dave?
No.
Okay, then we could address that.
Afternoon, Board. So this policy, this proposal is, I think, essentially what Supervisor Short suggested. It is removing a regulatory requirement. Under the current county grading ordinance, there's a broad listing of exemptions that could theoretically apply. One of the exemptions that would apply from a county grading permit would be if another agency issues a permit. So just as an example, whenever CAL FIRE issues a timber harvest permit or timber harvest plan, that exempts a property owner or developer from getting a permit from the county for a grading activity. What the county would still do on some exemptions from permits would still be to require a grading permit. So this is to create consistency from whenever a state requires a permit or whenever they provide an exemption. It would apply within the entire county for any activity that would be subject to the grading ordinance, except for those areas within the coastal zone, as Mr. Olson indicated. Clear? Good.
Bring it back.
Yep.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. And it brings us to budget transfers. So we have item 33, move and approve and adopt budget 0101 to the amount of $27,036 within the VAWA budget and spend grant funding as designated requested by the District Attorney's Office. Number 34, move and approve and adopt the budget transfer 0102 to the amount of $50,000 within the Public Health Budget Unit to cover the cost of upcoming consultation fees as requested by the Director of Health and Human Services. Number 35, approve and adopt budget transfer 0103 to the amount of $123,611 within the Public Health Emergency Preparedness, also known as Bioterrorism Preparedness Budget Unit, to allow for the department to hire consultants to update the pandemic preparedness plan for the public health preparedness plan as requested by the OES Physical Manager and County Administrative Officer. And number 36, adopt and approve budget number 0104 to the amount of $12,681 within the Emergency Response Fund Budget Unit to support healthcare coalitions and other healthcare activities, entities, and to help with COVID-19 treatment as requested by OES Fiscal Manager and County Administrative Officer.
Move to approve.
Second that.
Motion and second. Any public comment?
Yeah, we got to talk about this. So, you know, I don't like the idea of giving power to public health over bioterrorism. Because there's things coming out now about what occurred with COVID. And everybody was subjected to the jab. I mean, that's pretty scary if you're going to give them that kind of power. We don't know what that entails. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Give them that power?
You're not giving them power, you're preparing a plan.
Yeah, what's their plan?
Updating.
We don't know
The
yet.
plan is, yeah, you don't know yet, but you're approving it.
It's updating a plan that's currently in
And
place.
sometime in May of this year, oh God, I can never remember these people. United Nations? No, it's the,
WHO? I don't know.
yeah, it could be, but you know what, I don't know. I'd stay away from those things. Because, I mean, I don't have a problem with taking, ivermectin. It literally saved me. But other people do. We don't know what you can't trust the medical people anymore. You can't trust the science because they lie. So, shit.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Are we pulling the vote?
Yep, please.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges,
Yes.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. That brings us down to legislative and budget officer. Considering miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the County of Del Norte, authorize the chair to sign and send appropriate letters with respect to matters pending before the state and federal governments. 37, approve and authorize the chair to sign a comment letter on the Northwest Forest Plan amendment and direct the clerk of the board to transmit the letter to the county's federal advocate for submittal and requested by the assistant county administrative officer. Do we have anybody to speak to this?
Go ahead.
Yeah. This is one of the things that Supervisor Short did discuss that came out of the RCRC meeting. Obviously, when it comes to the Northwest Forest Plan, that Northwest Forest Plan in 1994 was a real game changer for the management of forests in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of the impetus for that was driven by the northern spotted owl, which was essentially an umbrella species for a movement environmentally to change the way our public lands and our forests were operated in. We know today a lot of that science has changed collectively, and for the most part was wrong. The reasons for it were wrong. That's now being documented, and unfortunately, we're losing more public forest lands at an alarming rate, based on essentially the outcomes of that forest plan in 1994. So the importance of what we're advocating for essentially is what is 65+% of our own backyard. But some of the most recent language that has been proposed, not yet adopted by Congress, would essentially limit the size or the age of the tree that essentially could be cut in our public forest lands. To me, that just goes back to subjective management in our forests and doesn't really look out for the biological resource, which is a lot of the reason why our public lands persist. And so, in this case, I'd move to approve and authorize the chair, in this case Dean, to comment, to move forward with a comment letter for the Northwest Forest Plan amendment.
I would ask for a substitute motion after discussing this with Assistant CAO Hooper and that piece that they want to restrict the age of a tree before, or and subject it to being a old growth or a mature forest. Mr. Hooper was nice enough to put together some additional language in that letter, and I can read it into the record and then move that we would include that, and that is just in.
I'd withdraw my motion.
Oh, thank you. There is a bullet point that starts in the agenda as it sits. There's a bullet point that starts increase and enhance wildfire fighting infrastructure in the NWFP areas, and this motion is to include the additional language that Mr. Hooper put in, and that is including opposed changes in the NWFP that would expand the definitions of old growth and/or mature forests that would reduce ability of the Forest Service to actively manage these forests against forest fire risk, for example, thinning and other treatments, or other threats emerging in recent years as a result of changing climate conditions and/or that would restrict the opportunities for commercial harvesting of timber on federally managed lands that have historically allowed for the commercial harvesting of timber. That would be my motion, to include that language.
I'd second that motion.
Thank you.
That motion.
Got a motion and a second. And pull the vote, please.
Public comment?
Oh, public comment, sorry. Get this right.
I applaud this move. It's eminently sensible and long overdue.
Thank you, Sam.
Wow, I like it.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring back, vote.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes. Oh, yes. That takes us to item 38, last one on one thing. Review and propose 2024 Del Norte County Legislative Platform, receive public input on the following recommendation actions, provide direction to staff to incorporate any final changes to the platform as agreed upon by the board, and 2, authorize the chair to sign the final document, and 3, direct the clerk of the board to transmit the signed legislative platform to the county's legislative representatives as well as the county, state, and federal advocates as requested by the assistant county administrative officer.
Mr. Chairman, I would move we approve items 1, 2, and 3 as you just read into the record.
Second that motion.
Any public comment?
I read through the platform the other day, and number one concern is for me, I'm an addict, so I stay away from alcohol, opioids, heavy stimulants. That's really it now. I need to quit smoking cigarettes, That's what I tell my kids, stay away from tobacco, alcohols, heavy stimulants, and opioids. But I didn't like that you're going to support legislation that supports stricter penalties for possession of opioids. For one thing, most opioids, besides heroin, I think, are all Schedule II drugs, so they're prescribed by doctors a lot of the time. Like when I lost my mom, we were giving her lots of morphine and Percocet, and when we took her in for the last few days, they gave her fentanyl too. So it is used. So the language is incorrect. And then for a lot of people, they end up with a huge addiction problem. And that's not treated well at jails. And I think that's what you guys say you're going to do, is you're going to restrict it with MAT treatment at the jail, stricter consequences for possession. And what I found is being an addict is I'd go to like a 12-step meeting, NA or AA, and you find people that don't judge you, and you make a go of it, I don't think jail rehabilitation works, and I think our history has shown that, you're not going to. This is a healthcare problem. There's an old comedian, and he died from his addiction, Mitch Hedberg, and he had a great joke, he's like, addiction's the only disease that people get angry at you for having, and he's like, it's like, damn it, Mitch, you're an addict, and it's like, nobody's ever like, damn it, Mitch, you got diabetes, And, and there are differences, we bring this one, I think we kind of are addicts if we're addicts, and it might end up being like phone scrolling or whatever, showing up to too many of these stupid meetings or something, But treatment can't happen in a jail. And I remember going through, I'd been in trouble, someone caught me in a field once, I was looking for snakes, and I happened to be high on meth. And I was a meth user for a couple of years, and an alcoholic. And so I had to go into treatment. And the treatment guy's an old cop, and he says, you know how you tell an addict's lie? Their lips are moving. And in this room, there's posters for Zoloft, And so I don't think it's the appropriate place to, treat your neighbor's health concerns, you know, and I think that'd be the healthcare district going back to reengaging, you know, so that there's, you know, a jail shouldn't be for that kind of thing. You know, we're finding out all kinds of, you know, I don't want to mention anybody's alcohol problems, but you know, we have problems, and you shouldn't use the jail to treat a health concern at all, you know.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
I'm sure you've all used opioids at some point.
Oh.
They did opium at
All right.
Thomas Jefferson. They all used to use opium. I've got to stay away from it, but it isn't Schedule II drugs, so I don't know if
I think we have a
Yes.
motion and a second.
And a second. Yep. Vote, poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Short?
Yes.
Chair Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank the amount of time that Assistant CAO Hooper put into this document. This has obviously been in the works for quite some period of time. We've shopped it around, more importantly, sought advice from both our federal and state representatives on our lobbying efforts. But good job, Randy, good effort, and thanks for coalescing our thoughts.
Here, here.
Appreciate all the hard work, and as of now, we are adjourned. We will reconvene February 13th, 2024. Thank you so much. I apologize.